The wind had teeth in New Mexico. Not the gentle kind that rustled through the cottonwoods back east where Elena's mother had grown up, but the sort that stripped paint from wood and hope from hearts. It came across the mesa like something with intent, carrying dust that got into everything, your eyes, your food, the cracks in your soul you didn't know were there until the loneliness settled in. Elena Cross stood in the doorway of what used to be her father's house, watching that wind tear across land that was supposed to mean something. 300 acres of stubborn dirt, rocks that broke plow blades, and cattle that were more skeleton than beef these days. The drought had been going on 2 years now. 2 years of watching the waterholes dry up, the grass turn to straw, the future shrink down to nothing but a horizon full of dust. She was 23 and felt 50. Miss Cross? The voice made her turn. A man stood beside the fence post, hat in his hands, looking uncomfortable in the way men do when they're about to deliver bad news they don't want to own. She recognized him, Samuel Yates, clerk from the land office in town. His presence here meant paperwork, and paperwork never meant anything good. Mr. Yates. She didn't move from the doorway. Let him come to her. She was done making things easy for men who showed up with documents that would take things away. He walked closer, dust rising around his boots. Up close, she could see the sweat on his collar despite the October chill. I'm here about the property taxes and the loan your father took out before he paused, searching for the polite word. Before he died. Elena finished it for him. No point dancing around it. Thomas Cross had dropped dead in this very doorway 16 months ago, grabbed his chest and went down like a felled tree. Turned out a man's heart could just stop when it got tired of fighting. She'd found that out the hard way. Yates nodded, relieved she'd said it. Yes, ma'am, the bank's been patient, what with your loss and all, but there's limits to patience when money's involved. How much? Pardon? How much do I owe? She already knew, had known for months, but hearing him say it would make it real, and she was tired of living in the space between knowing and accepting. Yates pulled out a paper, unfolded it with hands that shook slightly. $840 by the end of November, or the bank takes possession. $840. Might as well be $8,000. She had maybe $30 to her name. And that was if she sold everything down to the spoons. The cattle weren't worth selling, half-dead things that would bring pennies on the dollar. The land itself was worthless without water, and the water rights had been a point of contention since before her father's time. There's one other matter. Yates looked even more uncomfortable now. Your father made an arrangement before he passed, with a family up in Colorado. Elena felt something cold settle in her stomach. What kind of arrangement? A marriage arrangement, Miss Cross, with their son. The world seemed to tilt slightly. Marriage. Her father had sold her off like livestock and hadn't even had the courage to tell her before he died. The anger came quick and hot, but underneath it was something worse. A terrible, crushing understanding. Of course he had. What else could a dying man do with a daughter and a failing ranch? At least this way she'd have a roof over her head, even if it wasn't this roof. When? Her voice came out flat. He's expected to arrive within the week, ma'am. The agreement was that upon marriage, he'd assume the debt and the property would pass to both of you jointly. Your father's lawyer has the papers. What's his name? Yates consulted his document. Hale? Rowan Hale. Age 29, from a cattle family up in the Pueblo region. That's all I know. 29. So not ancient, at least. She'd been imagining some weathered 60-year-old looking for a young wife to nurse him through his final years. 29 meant he'd probably want children, want things from her she wasn't sure she had left to give. But beggars couldn't be choosers, and that's what she was now. A beggar, in everything but name. Thank you for letting me know, Mr. Yates. He nodded, clearly relieved to be dismissed. I'm sorry about all this, Miss Cross. Your father was a good man. Just had bad luck. Luck? Elena tasted the word. Sure. That's what it was. After he left, she walked out to where her father was buried. They'd put him on the hill overlooking the ranch, under a cottonwood that was barely holding on to life itself. No headstone yet. She couldn't afford one. Just a wooden cross with his name carved into it, already weathering gray. You could have told me. She spoke to the dirt. Could have at least given me the chance to say no. But would she have said no? With winter coming and the money gone and no prospects anywhere on the horizon, Her father had known her too well, known she'd fight him on it right up until she had no fight left, and then it'd be too late. This way, he'd made the choice before the choice became impossible. She hated him for it, loved him for it. Both things were true. The week passed in a blur of preparation that felt like mourning. She cleaned the house, really cleaned it, not just the surface tidying she'd been doing. Scrubbed floors, washed curtains, tried to make the place look like somewhere a man might want to live instead of a museum to failure. She slaughtered one of the chickens, the one that had stopped laying, and made a stew that would keep. Baked bread. Mended the dress that used to be her mother's Sunday best. Her mother wasn't there to see it. Sarah Cross had taken one look at her husband's grave and walked into her bedroom, and she hadn't really come out since. Oh, she moved around, ate when Elena made her eat, sat in her chair by the window. But the woman who'd sung while she worked, who'd taught Elena to read from the Bible and calculate feed costs in her head, that woman was gone. What remained was a shell that breathed and blinked and sometimes cried for no reason Elena could fix. "Mama, I'm getting married," Elena told her on the 6th day while braiding her mother's thin hair. "Man named Rowan Hale is coming tomorrow. Papa arranged it." Sarah Cross looked at her with eyes that were somewhere else. "Your father was always thinking ahead." "Yes, Mama." "Will he be good to you?" "I don't know." "Well." Her mother's hand found hers squeezed with surprising strength. "You be good to yourself then. Don't lose yourself trying to be what he needs. I did that. Look where it got me." It was the most lucid thing she'd said in months, and it broke Elena's heart clean in half. Rowan Hale arrived on a Tuesday morning, riding a roan horse that looked like it had seen hard miles. Elena watched from the window as he dismounted, taking in the details that would shape her future. Tall, maybe 6 feet, lean in the way of men who worked for their meals, dark hair that needed cutting, clothes that were worn but clean. He carried himself like someone who'd been in fights and knew he'd be in more. Not handsome, exactly. His face was too angular for that, nose broken at least once, scar running through his left eyebrow. But striking, the kind of face you wouldn't forget, even if you wanted to. She made him knock twice before she answered. Let him wait. Small rebellion, but it was hers. When she opened the door, his eyes met hers. Gray, like the sky before a storm. And for a long moment, neither of them spoke. He took her in the same way she'd taken him in, measuring, calculating, trying to figure out what kind of bargain he'd made. "Elena Cross?" His voice was deeper than she'd expected, rough at the edges. "That's me. Rowan Hale." I figured. Another pause. This was absurd. They were engaged to be married and standing here like strangers because that's exactly what they were. "You want to come in?" She stepped back from the doorway. "Rather talk out here first, if that's all right." He glanced past her into the house. "What I've got to say might make you want to shut that door in my face, and I'd rather you had the option." That surprised her. "Go ahead then." He set his hat on the porch rail, ran a hand through his hair. "I need you to know I didn't ask for this. Your father reached out to mine after he got sick, said he had a daughter, a ranch, and no way to take care of either one. My father—" He stopped, jaw working. "My father made the arrangement without consulting me. I found out about it 3 days after your father died." "So you don't want to be here?" "I didn't say that." His eyes came back to hers. "I said I didn't ask for it. Different thing." "Why come then? Why not just say no?" "Because I saw the books. Saw what your father owed, what the ranch was worth, what you were facing, and because—" He seemed to struggle with the next part. "Because my father's the kind of man who makes promises for other people and expects them kept. I didn't want that debt hanging over both our families if I backed out. Seemed cleaner to see it through. Honest, at least. She could work with honest, even if it wasn't what she'd hoped to hear. Not that she knew what she'd hoped for. Some romantic notion that he'd seen her picture and fallen in love. That was schoolgirl nonsense, and she'd stopped being a schoolgirl about the time her mother stopped singing." "All right." Elena crossed her arms. "So what now? We get married and you take over the ranch and I cook your meals and warm your bed? That the arrangement?" His jaw tightened. "The arrangement is we get married and we figure out how to save this place before the bank takes it. The rest—" He met her eyes again. "The rest is between us. I'm not looking for a servant or a whore. I can cook my own meals and I've gone this long without a warm bed. What I need is a partner, someone who knows this land and is willing to fight for it. And if I can't fight anymore? The question came out before she could stop it. If I'm just tired? Something shifted in his expression. Not pity, she would have hated pity, but understanding. Then we take turns being tired. You rest while I fight, I rest while you fight. That's what partners do. Despite everything, the absurdity of the situation, the rawness of having her future decided by dead men and debts, Elena felt something loosen in her chest. He wasn't promising love or happiness or any of the things that didn't matter in a place this hard. He was promising to show up, to work, to not leave her to drown alone. It was more than she'd expected and exactly what she needed. There's a preacher in town, she said. We could go tomorrow. Today would be better. Get it done. She almost smiled. Eager? Practical. The sooner we're married, the sooner I can start dealing with the bank. Your father's lawyer needs a certificate before he'll release the emergency funds. What emergency funds? The $100 my father put up as part of the arrangement. Enough to buy us some time. Maybe get the cattle through winter if we're smart about it. $100. Not enough to solve everything, but enough to breathe. Elena felt the weight on her chest ease slightly. Maybe, just maybe, this wouldn't be the disaster she'd been bracing for. All right, she made the decision. Let me get my mother ready. We'll ride into town. The wedding was quick and joyless, conducted by a preacher who'd clearly done this before for couples who were going through motions rather than celebrating. Elena wore her mother's dress. Rowan wore what he'd ridden in on. They said the words that bound them legally, if not emotionally, signed the papers, and walked out married. On the ride back, with her mother dozing in the wagon bed, Rowan spoke. I'll sleep in the barn until you're ready for me in the house. You don't have to. I do. He kept his eyes on the road. You didn't choose this. Neither did I. But I'm choosing to do it right. When you want me in that house, you'll tell me. Until then, I'll sleep in the barn, and we'll work the ranch, and we'll figure out the rest as we go. Elena looked at him, this stranger who was now her husband, this man who could have demanded his rights as a married man and instead was offering her space to adjust, and felt something dangerous stir in her chest. Not love. Too soon for that, and she wasn't fool enough to confuse gratitude with affection, but respect. And the faint, fragile possibility that maybe they could build something real out of this arrangement made by desperate men. Thank you, she said quietly. He nodded. Don't thank me yet. We've got a hell of a road ahead. That turned out to be more accurate than either of them knew. The first problem showed up 3 days after the wedding in the form of 3 men on horseback blocking the road to the north pasture. Elena recognized them immediately. Caleb Rourke and 2 of his brothers, Mason and Jeremiah. The Rourke family owned the biggest ranch in the territory, had been trying to buy out the smaller spreads for years. Her father had refused to sell, which had made him something between a nuisance and an enemy. Rowan pulled the wagon to a stop. Friends of yours? Opposite of friends. Thought so. He didn't sound worried, just alert. His hand moved casually to rest on his thigh, close to where Elena could see the butt of a revolver. Caleb Rourke walked his horse forward. He was a big man, broad through the shoulders, with the kind of face that would have been handsome if cruelty hadn't carved itself into every line. Heard you went and got married, Elena. Didn't invite us to the wedding. Wasn't that kind of wedding, Caleb. His eyes shifted to Rowan. So you're the fool from Colorado who bought himself a wife and a failing ranch. Rowan Hale, right? That's right. Rowan's voice was level. And you are? Caleb Rourke, this is my land you're on. Map says it's Crossland, my wife's land. The emphasis on wife was deliberate, and Elena saw Caleb's expression darken. He'd made it clear years ago that he'd expected to marry her himself eventually, fold the Cross Ranch into his empire the easy way. Her father's arrangement had ruined that plan. Maps can be wrong. Caleb's hand moved to his own gun. Boundaries can shift. Rowan smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. They can, but they won't. Not while I'm breathing. The tension stretched tight enough to snap. Elena's hand found the rifle next to her seat, not pointing it at anyone, but making sure everyone knew it was there. Mason and Jeremiah shifted in their saddles, hands drifting toward their weapons. Then Caleb laughed, breaking the moment. You got spine, Hale. I'll give you that. But spine don't mean much when you're broke and the bank's coming for you. Maybe, Rowan gathered the reins. But I'd rather be broke with spine than rich without it. Now, if you'll excuse us, we've got work to do." He drove the wagon forward, straight at the three men, and for a second Elena thought it would end in blood right there. But Caleb pulled his horse aside at the last moment, letting them pass. His voice followed them. "Enjoy the work while you can, Hale. That ranch won't be yours much longer." Rowan didn't respond, but Elena felt the tension in him like a wire pulled taut. They rode in silence until they were out of sight, and then he stopped the wagon. "How bad is it?" he asked. "With them?" "Bad. They've been pushing out the small ranchers for years. Most sell. The ones who don't—" She thought of the Hendersons, whose barn had burned down mysteriously. The Martins, whose cattle had gotten sick from poisoned water. Things happened to them. Things. Rowan's voice was flat. "You mean Caleb Rourke happens to them?" "Can't prove it. Never can. But yes." He was quiet for a long moment, staring at the land stretching out around them. "Your father know about this when he made the arrangement?" "Probably. Why?" "Because it means he wasn't just finding you a husband. He was finding you someone who could fight." Rowan looked at her. "My father's ranch isn't like this. It's established, successful. I didn't need to come here for land or money. Your father must have known that. Must have chosen specifically someone who'd have reason to stand and fight rather than take the easy way out and sell." Elena had never thought of it that way. Had seen her father's arrangement as desperation, not strategy. But looking at Rowan now, at the set of his jaw, the way he'd faced down Caleb without flinching, she wondered if maybe her father had known exactly what he was doing. One last gambit to save the ranch and his daughter both. "Can you?" she asked. "Fight them, I mean. Caleb's got money, men, connections. We've got debt and dying cattle and $100 that won't last the month. I've been in worse fights." "What happened?" His smile was grim. "I won. Not always pretty, not always clean, but I won." They started working the ranch the next day, and Elena discovered that Rowan hadn't been lying about pulling his weight. He was up before dawn, worked until dark, never complained, and never stopped moving. He fixed the fence that had been broken for months, cleared the irrigation ditches that had silted up, repaired the barn roof that leaked every time it rained. But more than that, he learned. Watched how Elena handled the cattle, asked questions about the land, studied the water sources and grazing patterns like he was memorizing a map for battle. He treated her like she had knowledge worth having, experience worth respecting. After years of men assuming she was just her father's daughter, decorative and useless, it was startling to be seen as competent. They fell into a rhythm. Elena would handle the house and her mother in the mornings, then join Rowan in the afternoon for the heavier work. They ate dinner together. Simple meals, nothing fancy, and talked about the ranch, what needed doing, what could wait, where to spend the money they didn't have. He still slept in the barn. She hadn't invited him into the house yet. Wasn't sure when she would. The marriage was legal, but it didn't feel real, and she wasn't ready to make it real in the ways that mattered. Rowan seemed content to wait, or if he wasn't content, he hid it well. 2 weeks in, they were in town getting supplies when Elena ran into Margaret Chen, who ran the boarding house on Main Street. Margaret had been one of her mother's few friends, back before the light went out of Sarah Cross's eyes. "Elena!" Margaret pulled her into a hug that smelled like lavender soap. "I heard you got married. Let me see this husband of yours." Rowan was down the street talking to the blacksmith, far enough away that Elena could speak freely. "His name is Rowan. It was arranged." Margaret's expression softened. "Your father's doing?" "Yes." "And? Is he treating you well?" Elena thought about how to answer that. "He's fair. Works hard. Doesn't ask for more than I can give." "But you don't love him." "I barely know him, Margaret." The older woman squeezed her hand. "Love can grow, dear. I've seen it happen. My own marriage started much the same way, arranged by our families back in San Francisco. 30 years later, I buried the best man I ever knew." Her eyes glistened. "Give it time. See who he is when things get hard." "Things are already hard." "Harder then. See who he is when you're at the breaking point. That's when you find out what someone's made of." That night, Elena found Rowan in the barn, writing in a ledger by lantern light. She stood in the doorway, watching him work. He'd taken off his shirt in the heat, and she could see the scars, old ones, stories written in damaged skin. A bullet wound in his shoulder. knife slash across his ribs, burns on his forearm that looked like they'd hurt going on 10 years. He looked up, saw her watching. Need something? Who were you before you came here? The question hung between them. He set down the pencil, leaned back against the hay bale. That's a big question. We're married. Figure I should know. Fair enough. He was quiet for a moment, choosing his words. I was a lot of things. Cowboy, scout for the army for a couple of years, did some bounty work when I needed money fast, got in some fights I probably should have walked away from, got out of some fights I probably should have stayed in. His hand moved to the scar on his ribs. Learned the hard way that being right doesn't matter if you're dead. Why'd you stop? The bounty work? He shrugged. Got tired of hunting men. Tired of seeing what it did to me. My father needed help with the ranch, so I went home. Tried to be the son he wanted instead of the one I'd turned into. And then he promised me to a woman I'd never met and sent me to a ranch that's barely holding on. Rowan's smile was rueful, but I'm starting to think maybe he did me a favor. All that running I did, maybe I was just looking for a reason to stop. A place worth fighting for instead of just fighting. Elena stepped into the barn, closing the distance between them. Is this that place? Could be. His eyes met hers. If we can keep it. Caleb won't make it easy. I don't need easy. I need possible. She sat down on the hay bale next to him, close enough to feel the warmth coming off his skin. What do? We make alliances. Your father fought alone and it didn't work. We need the other ranchers on our side. The ones Caleb's pushing out. They're scared, but they're also angry. We give them a reason to stand together instead of falling one by one. We might have a chance. They won't listen to me. I'm just Thomas Cross's daughter. But they'll listen to Thomas Cross's daughter who married a man with a reputation. Rowan turned to face her fully. I need you to know something, Elena. Before we do this, before we make this fight, I've killed men. Not proud of it, not ashamed of it. It was necessary. If we stand against Caleb Rourke, it might get necessary again. I won't run from that. But I need to know you won't either. Are you asking if I can kill someone? I'm asking if you can live with me doing it. If you can live with what this might become. Elena thought about her father, dead in the doorway. Her mother, lost in a grief that had no bottom. The ranch slowly dying around them while Caleb Rourke circled like a vulture, waiting for the final breath. She thought about Margaret's words. See who he is when things get hard. I can live with it, she said. Long as we're living when it's over. Rowan studied her face in the lamplight, looking for doubt, for fear, for the hesitation that would make him walk away from this. Whatever he saw, it seemed to satisfy him. All right then, tomorrow we start building our army. But tomorrow came with its own problems. Elena found the cattle first, 3 of them, lying in the north pasture with their throats cut. Not wild animals, not disease, murder, plain and simple. A message from Caleb Rourke that he wasn't going to wait for the bank to do his work for him. Rowan stood over the bodies, his face carved from stone. How much were they worth? Maybe $60. If we could have gotten them to market healthy. Elena felt sick. They'd been banking on those cattle making it through winter, selling them in spring. Now that money was just blood soaking into dirt. He'll keep doing this. Rowan's voice was quiet. Cutting us down piece by piece until there's nothing left worth fighting for. So what do we do? He looked at her and Elena saw something in his eyes that made her pulse kick up. Not anger. Anger would have been simpler. This was calculation, strategy. The look of a man who'd fought before and knew exactly what it cost. We make him regret it, Rowan said, starting tonight. Elena had expected him to ride straight to the Rourke ranch with guns blazing. That would have been the stupid thing. The thing that got them both killed and gave Caleb exactly what he wanted. But Rowan was smarter than that. Or maybe just meaner in ways that counted. They buried the cattle that afternoon deep enough that scavengers wouldn't dig them up. Waste of good meat, but eating beef that had been murdered felt wrong somehow, like accepting what had been done to them. Rowan worked in silence, digging harder than necessary, and Elena knew better than to try talking to him. Some anger needed space to burn itself out. When the last shovelful of dirt was packed down, he finally spoke. We're going to see Jack Morrison tonight. Morrison ran a small spread about 8 miles east, barely 50 head of cattle and land that was more rock than grass. Elena knew him the way you knew all your neighbors out here, nodding acquaintance at church, helping hands when someone's barn raised, the occasional borrowed tool. Her father had called him stubborn and honest, which in New Mexico was about the best you could say about anyone. Why Morrison?
Bonus.
Because Caleb tried to buy him out last month and he refused. Because his water source runs through our property and he knows if we go down, he's next. Rowan leaned on the shovel. And because he's got 3 sons old enough to hold rifles and mean enough to use them. You think he'll help us? I think he'll listen. After that, we'll see. They rode out as the sun was setting, the sky turning colors that didn't seem possible, orange bleeding into purple, bleeding into something close to black. The kind of beauty that made you forget, just for a moment, how hard this land was trying to kill you. Elena had grown up with these sunsets, had stopped noticing them somewhere along the way, but watching Rowan watch them, she saw them fresh again through his eyes. It's different from Colorado. He said more to himself than to her. Better or worse? Just different. Colorado's got mountains that make you feel small. He gestured at the endless flat stretching out in all directions. This makes you feel exposed, like there's nowhere to hide. There isn't. Good. His smile was thin. I'm tired of hiding. The Morrison place looked like every other struggling ranch in the territory. House that needed paint, barn that needed shoring up, fence posts that leaned at angles that would have made a carpenter weep. But the land was clean, the animals looked cared for, and when Jack Morrison came out to meet them with a rifle in his hands, his eyes were clear. Rowan Hale. Morrison's voice was cautious. Heard you married Thomas Cross's girl. I did. Rowan dismounted, hands visible and empty. This is Elena, my wife. Morrison's eyes shifted to her, softened slightly. Sorry about your father, Elena. He was a good man. Thank you, Mr. Morrison. Jack. He lowered the rifle but didn't put it down. What brings you out here this late? Someone killed 3 of our cattle last night. Rowan said it flat, no emotion. Cut their throats and left them to rot. Morrison's jaw tightened. Caleb? Can't prove it, but yes. Can't ever prove it with him. Morrison spat into the dust. He's too smart for that. Pays men to do his dirty work. Keeps his own hands clean. Which is why we need to be smarter. Rowan pulled out a cigarette, offered one to Morrison. The older man took it, and they stood there smoking while Elena waited. This was man business, the kind that happened in silences and shared tobacco. She'd learned early that sometimes the best thing to do was just let it happen. Finally, Morrison spoke. What are you proposing? An alliance. The small ranchers, everyone Caleb's been pushing. We stop fighting alone and start fighting together. Share water sources, pool resources for supplies, watch each other's land. Rowan took a drag. And when he comes for one of us, he gets all of us. That's a nice dream, Hale. But dreams don't stop bullets. No. Bullets stop bullets. How many men can Caleb bring to a fight? Maybe a dozen if he pulls everyone from his ranch. How many can we bring if we stand together? 20? 30? Rowan's eyes were steady. He's been winning because we've been giving him easy targets. Time to make it hard. Morrison was quiet for a long time, smoking and thinking. Elena could see him weighing it, the risk of standing up against the safety of keeping his head down. It was the calculation everyone out here made eventually. At what point was survival worth less than dignity? My boys are 17, 15, and 13, Morrison said finally. If this goes wrong, I'm not just gambling with my life. I'm gambling with theirs. If you do nothing, Caleb takes your ranch eventually anyway. Rowan's voice was gentle but firm. At least this way you're fighting for something instead of just waiting to lose it. And if we win, then we build something better than what we had. A territory where a man can work his land without wondering if his neighbor's going to burn him out. Morrison dropped his cigarette, ground it under his heel. I'll talk to my boys. If they're willing, I'm in. But you need more than just me, Hale. You need Charlie Brennan up north, the Martinez family west of town, maybe old Henry Walsh if his arthritis isn't too bad. You need enough people that Caleb thinks twice. I know, that's where Elena comes in. Rowan looked at her. People know her, trust her. If she asks, they'll at least listen. Elena felt the weight of that settle on her shoulders. Her father's daughter. Her mother's legacy. The girl who'd stayed when so many others had left. It meant something here, even if it hadn't felt like much when she'd been alone. Now, with Rowan beside her, maybe it could mean more. "I'll talk to them," she said. Morrison nodded. "Give me 2 days. I'll send word if we're in." They rode back in darkness thick enough to swallow sound, the horses picking their way carefully over ground they knew by feel. Elena's mind was spinning with everything that needed to happen, all the ways this could go wrong. But underneath the fear was something else, a flicker of something she hadn't felt in months. Hope, maybe. Or just the relief of finally moving instead of waiting to be moved. "You did good back there," Rowan's voice came out of the darkness. "I didn't do anything. You let me do it. Some women would have jumped in, tried to help, made it harder." He paused. "Thank you. Is that what your life was like before? Talking men into fights?" "Sometimes. More often I was the one being talked into them." His laugh was dry. "I'm better at the talking now. Used to be I'd just hit first and explain later." "What changed?" "Got tired of explaining to sheriffs why I needed to leave town." Another pause. "And I got older. Turns out when you're 20 and picking fights, people think you're tough. When you're 30 and doing it, they think you're just mean." Elena smiled in the darkness. "Are you? Mean?" "When I need to be. Hope I don't need to be with you." She thought about that. About the difference between the violence he'd hinted at, the bounty work, the army scouting, whatever fights he'd walked away from with those scars, and the careful way he'd approached Morrison. Both were tools, she realized. He'd just learned when to use which one. "My father was mean sometimes." The words came out before she could stop them. "Not cruel, but hard. He'd make decisions without asking anyone, just expect you to go along. Drove my mother crazy." Is that what happened to her? Him being hard? Partly. Mostly it was losing the ranch piece by piece and watching him kill himself, trying to save it. She just gave up somewhere along the way. Decided it was easier to be empty than to keep hurting. Elena's throat tightened. "I'm scared I'll end up like her." Rowan was quiet for so long she thought he wasn't going to answer. Then, "You won't." "How do you know?" "Because you're still fighting. She quit. You haven't." His hand found hers in the darkness, rough and warm. "Long as you keep swinging, you won't end up like her." It was the first time he'd touched her beyond the necessary, helping her into wagons, steadying her over rough ground. His hand in hers felt foreign and familiar all at once, and she didn't pull away. They rode the rest of the way like that, connected in the dark, and when they got back to the ranch, Elena made a decision. "Come inside tonight," she said. Rowan looked at her, trying to read her expression in the moonlight. "You sure?" "No, but I'm tired of you sleeping in the barn like a hired hand. You're my husband. Act like it." She regretted the words as soon as they were out. Too harsh, too demanding. But Rowan just smiled. "Yes, ma'am." He took the barn, bedded down the horses while she went inside to check on her mother. Sarah was already asleep, curled on her side like a child, breathing the shallow breaths of someone who didn't quite want to be conscious. Elena pulled the blanket up over her shoulders and whispered goodnight to a woman who couldn't hear her. When Rowan came in, she showed him where he could wash up, gave him one of her father's old nightshirts that was too small in the shoulders but would work. They moved around each other awkwardly, two people trying to share space they weren't used to sharing. Finally, standing in the bedroom they were supposed to share, Elena cleared her throat. "I'm not," she started. "I mean, tonight isn't—" "I know." Rowan cut her off gently. "I'll take the floor." "You don't have to—" "I do. This is your room, Elena, has been your whole life. I'm not taking your bed until you offer it." He grabbed a blanket from the chest, started making a pallet on the floor. "Besides, I've slept in worse places. At least your floor doesn't have scorpions." She wanted to argue, but the relief was too strong. Instead, she climbed into bed, blew out the lamp, and lay there in the darkness, listening to him settle on the floor. Strange, having another person's breathing in the room. Strange, but not unpleasant. "Rowan?" "Yeah?" "Thank you for not pushing." "Nothing to thank me for. This is your choice to make, not mine." She rolled over, tried to find sleep. It came eventually, fitful and full of dreams about cattle with cut throats and men with guns and a barn burning in the distance. The next 2 days were a blur of riding. They hit every small ranch within 20 miles, making the same pitch Morrison had heard. Some listened, some didn't. Charlie Brennan signed on immediately, his ranch bordering Caleb's land on the north and bearing the brunt of constant pressure. The Martinez family, 3 brothers and their elderly father, needed convincing, but Elena's Spanish was good enough to bridge the gap, and eventually they agreed. Henry Walsh, 70 if he was a day and mean as a snake, laughed in their faces. "You're asking me to go to war with Caleb Rourke? Boy, I've lived this long by knowing when to fold. This is a folding hand." "Then fold," Rowan said evenly. "But when Caleb comes for your land, and he will, don't expect any help from us. You're making your choice. Live with it." Walsh's expression darkened, but he didn't call them back. They had better luck with Sarah and Tom Hendricks, whose barn had mysteriously burned the year before. Tom was angry enough to fight, and Sarah was practical enough to see the wisdom in numbers. "We're in," Tom said. "Tell us when and where." By the end of the second day, they had commitments from 7 families. Not an army, but enough. Rowan called a meeting at the Morrison place for Saturday night, after dark when prying eyes would be asleep. But Caleb didn't wait for Saturday. Elena was in town Thursday morning, buying supplies with the last of their ready cash, when she ran into Mason Rourke outside the general store. He was leaning against the post, clearly waiting for someone. When he saw her, his smile was all teeth. "Mrs. Hale, fancy meeting you here." She tried to walk past him. He stepped into her path. "My brother wanted me to give you a message." Mason's voice was casual. "He says your husband's been visiting the neighbors, making promises he can't keep." "I don't know what you're talking about." "Sure you don't." He leaned closer, close enough that she could smell the whiskey on his breath. "Tell Rowan that Caleb's a patient man, but his patience has limits. Keep pushing, and he'll push back hard." "Is that a threat?" "It's friendly advice." Mason's smile widened. "Though, if you want it to be a threat, I can arrange that too." Elena felt the anger rising, hot and familiar. This was what they did, the Rourkes, made you feel small and scared and helpless. She'd felt it her whole life, watching her father bow and scrape to avoid their wrath. Well, she wasn't her father. "Tell Caleb we're not scared of him." The words came out steadier than she felt. "And tell him if he wants to deliver threats, he can come do it himself instead of sending his drunk brother to harass women in the street." Mason's expression went cold. "Careful, Elena. You're not Thomas Cross's untouchable daughter anymore. You're just some Colorado drifter's wife. That's a lot less protection, maybe. But I'm also someone who knows where you were the night the Henderson barn burned, and who saw Jeremiah cutting fence wire on the Martinez property last spring." Elena stepped closer, matching his posture. "You want to start a war of who knows what about who, Mason? Because I've lived here my whole life. You think I don't have stories?" For a second, she thought he might hit her. His hand twitched toward his gun, and she prepared to scream, to fight, to do whatever it took. But then someone cleared their throat behind them, and they both turned to see Sheriff Tom Hendricks, no relation to the rancher family, standing there with his hand on his own weapon. "Everything all right here, Mrs. Hale?" "Just fine, Sheriff. Mr. Rourke was just leaving." Mason gave her one last look, full of promise, then tipped his hat mockingly and walked away. Elena let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. "You shouldn't provoke them," Hendricks said quietly. "The Rourkes don't forget. Neither do I." Elena picked up her dropped supplies. "Thanks for the interruption, Sheriff. Just doing my job. Though between you and me," he lowered his voice, "whatever your husband's planning with the other ranchers, be careful. Caleb's got friends in Santa Fe, legal friends. He can make trouble beyond just fence cutting and barn burning." "Noted." She rode home faster than was safe, her heart still pounding from the confrontation. Rowan was in the north pasture, stringing new wire, when she found him. One look at her face and he dropped the tools. "What happened?" She told him, all of it. Mason's threat, her response, the sheriff's warning. Rowan listened without interrupting, his expression getting harder with each word. "You shouldn't have antagonized him," he said when she finished. "I know, but I couldn't just—" "I'm not saying you were wrong." He cut her off. "I'm saying you shouldn't have had to. This is my fight. I should have been there. You can't be everywhere, Rowan. No, but I can make sure Caleb knows that threatening you is the same as threatening me. He started walking toward the barn. Saddle your horse. We're riding into town. What are you going to do? Have a conversation. The way he said it made Elena's stomach drop. Rowan, if you kill him, I'm not going to kill him. He was already saddling his horse. I'm just going to make sure he understands the rules. They found Caleb at the saloon, which everyone knew was his office more than his ranch ever was. He sat at a table in the back, playing cards with men who laughed at his jokes, and made sure he won just often enough to keep him happy. When Rowan walked in with Elena behind him, the whole room went quiet. Caleb looked up, smiled like he'd been expecting them. Rowan, Hale, come to join the game? Come to have a word? Rowan's voice carried across the room. About your brother. Which one? I've got 3. Mason, the one who threatened my wife this morning. Caleb's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. That's so. Mason, you threatened Mrs. Hale. Mason, sitting 2 tables over, shrugged. Had a conversation, might have gotten heated. See, that's where we have a problem. Rowan moved closer to Caleb's table. Not aggressive, but not backing down either. My wife doesn't have conversations that get heated with men who've been drinking. What she has is men who threaten her because they think she's an easy target. Is there a point to this, Hale? Point is simple. Rowan leaned on the table close enough that Caleb had to look up at him. You want to come at me. Come at me. You want to burn my barn, steal my cattle, poison my water. I'll fight you for it. But you leave Elena out of it, and you definitely don't send your drunk brother to intimidate her in the street. Caleb stood up slowly, matching Rowan's posture. They were the same height, but Caleb had the weight advantage in the home territory. You think you can walk into my town and tell me what I can and can't do? Your town? Rowan smiled, but it was the smile of a man who'd been in this position before and knew how it would end. Caleb, you don't own this town. You just think you do. Big difference. The room was holding its breath now, everyone waiting to see which way this would break. Elena felt the gun at her hip, the one Rowan had insisted she carry after the cattle incident. She'd never shot a man before, never even pointed a gun at another person. But if Caleb reached for his weapon, she'd learn fast. Then Caleb laughed. You got balls, Hale. I'll give you that. What I've got is a wife who deserves to walk through town without being harassed. That's all I'm asking for, basic respect. And if I can't guarantee that? Caleb's voice was soft now, dangerous. If Mason's his own man and I can't control what he does, then Mason and I will have a conversation, and his won't be as polite as this one. The threat hung there, clear and unmistakable. Caleb's jaw worked, and Elena could see him calculating how much this was worth, whether pushing now would gain him anything, what the cost would be if this turned into actual violence right here in front of witnesses. Finally, he sat back down. Mason, apologize to Mrs. Hale. Caleb, now. Mason looked like he'd swallowed something rotten, but he stood up, turned to Elena. My apologies, ma'am. I was out of line. The words were forced, insincere, but they were words. Elena nodded stiffly. Accepted. Rowan straightened. Appreciate the conversation, Caleb. Hope we don't need to have another one. So do I, Hale. So do I. They walked out of the saloon, and Elena didn't let herself breathe normally until they were on their horses and moving. Then she turned to Rowan. That was insane. That was necessary. He kept his eyes forward. Caleb respects strength. Only strength. Backing down would have made things worse. Or you could have gotten shot. Could have. Didn't. He glanced at her. You had your gun ready. It wasn't a question. Yes. Would you have used it? Elena thought about Mason's smirk, about Caleb's casual cruelty, about every time someone had made her feel small and helpless. Yes. Rowan nodded like she'd passed some test he hadn't told her she was taking. Good. The meeting Saturday night drew more people than expected. Word had spread about the confrontation at the saloon, about Rowan standing up to Caleb, and apparently that meant something to folks who'd been looking for someone to stand behind. They gathered in Morrison's barn, 15 men and 3 women who ran ranches or worked them, all with the same worn look of people who'd been fighting too long with too little. Rowan stood on a hay bale so everyone could see him, and Elena stood beside him. He'd asked her to speak first, said it would mean more coming from someone they'd known their whole lives. She'd argued, but he'd been right. These were her people, even if she'd never felt like she belonged to them. Most of you knew my father. She started, her voice shakier than she wanted. Knew he was stubborn. Knew he'd rather break than bend. I used to think that was just him being difficult, but he wasn't being difficult. He was being honest. This land, our land, it's worth fighting for, not because it's easy or profitable or pretty, because it's ours. She paused, looking at the faces watching her. Jack Morrison with his 3 sons. Charlie Brennan, whose wife had died giving birth on this frontier. The Martinez brothers, who'd come from Mexico with nothing and built something anyway. Sarah and Tom Hendricks, still smelling like smoke from the barn they'd lost. Caleb Rourke thinks he can take it. Thinks if he pushes hard enough, long enough, we'll all fold. Elena's voice got stronger. Maybe he's right. Maybe we would, one by one. But together? She looked at Rowan, who nodded encouragement. Together we're stronger than him, smarter than him, and we've got more to lose, which makes us more dangerous. Pretty words, Elena. Charlie Brennan spoke up. But words don't stop bullets. What's the actual plan? Rowan stepped forward. The plan is simple. We pool our resources, share water, share grazing land, share watchmen. Anyone sees trouble on their ranch, they fire 3 shots. Everyone close enough to hear comes running. Caleb can't fight all of us at once, so he'll have to either back off or escalate. And if he escalates? This from one of the Martinez brothers. Then we're ready for that too. We organize patrols, make sure no ranch is left undefended. We document everything he does, every fence cut, every cow killed, every threat made. Build a case that even his friends in Santa Fe can't ignore. Rowan's eyes swept the group. I'm not saying this will be clean or easy, but I'm saying it can work. If we trust each other's. Why should we trust you? Henry Walsh's voice came from the back. Elena was surprised to see him there after he'd turned them down. You're not from here. Don't know these people. Don't know this land. You're right. I don't know this land like you do. But I know Caleb's type. Knew plenty of them back in Colorado, back in Kansas before that. Men who think their money gives them rights over other people. Rowan's jaw set. And I know how to stop them. Not always legal, not always pretty, but I know how. You saying you'll kill him? Walsh pressed. I'm saying I'll do what's necessary to protect my wife and my land. Same as any of you would. Same as you should have done before it got this bad. That stung, and Elena could see it land. Walsh looked away first. Tom Hendricks stood up. I'm in. Already told Rowan that, but I'll say it here. Sarah and I are tired of being scared. Rather go down fighting. Same here, Morrison added. My boys deserve better than watching me lose everything without lifting a finger. One by one, they committed. Not everyone. Some slipped out during the meeting, too scared or too practical to risk it. But enough stayed that when they counted heads at the end, they had 12 families representing maybe 40 people who could hold a rifle if needed. It wasn't an army, but it was something. They spent the next hour working out logistics. Who would patrol when, where the signal fires would be set for emergencies, how to get messages between ranches quickly. Rowan had clearly done this before, organizing men for a fight, and he moved through it with the efficiency of experience. Elena took notes, knowing someone needed to keep track of who agreed to what. By the time people started leaving, it was past midnight. Rowan walked each family out, shaking hands, making sure everyone knew where to reach him if trouble came. Elena watched him work the group, saw how he balanced confidence with humility, strength with approachability. He'd have made a good politician in another life, but this life needed him to be something else. When the last wagon rolled away and it was just them and the Morrisons, Jack pulled Rowan aside. You know this means war. I know. Real war, not just posturing and threats. Caleb won't tolerate this. He'll come at us hard. Let him. Rowan's voice was tired but certain. We're ready. Are we? Morrison glanced at Elena. No offense to your wife, but most of these folks are farmers and ranchers, not fighters. When bullets start flying, they might fold. Then we make sure they don't have time to think about folding. We hit first, hit hard, and hit where it hurts Caleb most. Elena stepped forward. What are you planning? Not here. Rowan looked around like the darkness had ears. Back at our place. The ride home was quiet, both of them lost in thoughts about what they'd started. The ranch looked small and vulnerable when they got there. Just a few buildings on a whole lot of empty land. Easy to defend if you had enough people. Impossible if you didn't. Inside, with the door barred and the lamps lit low, Rowan finally explained. Caleb's power comes from three things: his cattle, his men, and his reputation. We can't touch his men without starting the shooting war we're not ready for, but his cattle and his reputation, those are vulnerable. You want to steal his cattle? Elena couldn't believe it. Not steal, scatter. Drive them off his land, mix them with herds from other ranches, make it impossible for him to prove which are his. Rowan pulled out a rough map he'd been working on. His north pasture borders open range. No fences there, just markers. We go in quiet, spook the herd, drive them north. By the time he realizes what's happened, they'll be scattered across 50 miles. That's insane. Maybe. But it's the kind of insane that makes him look weak, makes his men question whether he can protect his own interests. Once that reputation cracks, everything else follows. Rowan looked at her. I'm not doing this without you on board. This is your fight as much as mine. Maybe more. Elena thought about her father, who'd fought alone and lost. About her mother, who'd given up rather than keep fighting. About Mason's sneer and Caleb's smug confidence, and every time someone had made her feel like she didn't matter. When? She asked. New moon. 3 nights from now. We'll have the Morrison boys and Charlie Brennan's nephew. 5 of us total. Get in. Scatter the herd. Get out before anyone knows we were there. And if we get caught, then we fight our way out. Rowan said it simply, like it was the most natural thing in the world. But we won't get caught. I've done this before. Cattle rustling? Similar. During the war, he stopped, seemed to reconsider. Different time, different reasons. Point is, I know how to move quiet and hit fast. Elena nodded slowly. They were really doing this. Crossing the line from resistance to aggression, from defending to attacking. Once they did this, there was no going back. Caleb would know they'd hit him, even if he couldn't prove it, and he'd respond. I'm coming with you, she said. Elena? No arguments. It's my ranch. My fight. I'm coming. Rowan studied her face, looking for hesitation. Whatever he saw must have satisfied him because he nodded. All right, but you follow my lead and you don't hesitate when I give an order. Can you do that? Yes. And if it goes wrong, if we have to shoot our way out, you can pull that trigger? Elena remembered the weight of the gun at her hip in the saloon, remembered how ready she'd been to use it. I can. Then we go together. The next 3 days passed in a haze of preparation. Rowan drilled her on riding quiet, on reading the land in darkness, on a dozen small skills she'd never needed before. Morrison's boys showed up to practice too, and Elena was surprised to see they were better at this than she'd expected. Turned out growing up hunting in territory where sound carried for miles taught you things about stealth. Charlie Brennan's nephew, a kid named Tommy, who was maybe 19, was less impressive. He swaggered and boasted and generally acted like someone who'd never been shot at and thought war was glorious. Rowan pulled him aside the second day, and whatever he said made Tommy go pale and quiet. After that, the kid paid attention. Sarah, Elena's mother, not the Hendricks woman, wandered through these preparations like a ghost, not understanding or not caring. Once she asked Elena where her father was, and Elena had to explain again that he was dead. The confusion in her mother's eyes was worse than grief would have been. Will I end up like that? Elena asked Rowan that night, lying in the darkness with him on the floor beside the bed. If you die, will I just fade away? You won't. How can you be sure? Because you're already stronger than you think. Your mother... He paused, choosing words carefully. She loved your father too much, put everything she was into being his wife, his partner. When he died, there wasn't enough of her left over. But you're not like that. I could be. I love... She stopped, not ready to finish that sentence, but Rowan heard it anyway. You love the ranch, the land, your independence. Me, his voice softened. Maybe me, eventually, but not enough to disappear into. And that's good, Elena. That's what'll keep you whole. She reached down in the darkness, found his hand. He squeezed back and they lay there connected, listening to the wind try to tear the roof off. The night of the new moon was cold and clear, stars so bright they hurt to look at. Rowan had them all meet 2 miles from the Rourke Ranch in a dry wash where their horses wouldn't be visible from the main road. Elena's heart was hammering so hard she thought everyone could hear it. "Last chance to back out," Rowan told them all. "No shame if you do. This crosses a line." Nobody moved. "All right then. Elena and Morrison, you two are on watch. Find high ground, keep eyes on the ranch house. You see lights, you signal. Tommy, you're with me and Jackson Morrison. We go in on foot, quiet. Caleb runs about 300 head in that north pasture. We don't need to move them all, just enough to create chaos." They moved through the darkness like shadows, and Elena felt something shift inside her. This was it, the moment where they stopped being victims and became something else, something harder, something that fought back. The Rourke Ranch was bigger than theirs, better maintained, visible proof of money and power. It made Elena's anger burn hotter. All of this bought with bullying and theft and her father's broken heart. She and young Morrison, Jackson, built like his father but quieter, found their vantage point on a ridge overlooking the ranch house. From here, they could see the cattle milling in the pasture, shadows among shadows. Could see the faint light in one window of the house where someone was still awake. "You scared?" Jackson whispered. "Terrified." "Good. Me too." He grinned in the darkness. "My pa says fear keeps you sharp." They watched Rowan and the others approach the pasture from the east, moving low and slow. Elena held her breath without meaning to. This was the moment where everything could go wrong. A spooked cow, a wakeful ranch hand, pure bad luck. But Rowan moved like he'd been born to this, and the others followed his lead. They reached the herd, spread out, and then started making noise. Low whistles, hand claps, anything to get the cattle moving without panicking them into a stampede. It worked. The herd began to shift, to flow north like water finding a path. Slow at first, then faster as the momentum built. 300 head of cattle worth thousands of dollars, moving away from Caleb Rourke's land like they'd decided on their own. Then a dog barked. Elena's stomach dropped. Rowan had said they'd accounted for the dogs, had brought meat scraps laced with something to keep them quiet. But there was always one dog, one variable, one thing you couldn't plan for. The light in the ranch house went out. A minute later, it came back on. Then another window lit up. "They know." Jackson's voice was tight. "Signal them, now." Jackson pulled out the small mirror they'd brought, used it to catch starlight and flash a pattern toward the pasture. Once, twice, 3 times. The agreed signal to abort. But Rowan either didn't see it or chose to ignore it because he kept pushing the herd. The cattle were really moving now, building to the edge of a stampede. If they ran, they'd scatter even further. But if Caleb's men caught them here... The ranch house door banged open. Men spilled out, carrying rifles and lanterns. Elena counted 6, maybe 7. Too many. "We have to help them." She was already moving, pulling her rifle from its scabbard. "Elena, your husband said to stay, Itrais." "I don't care what he said. Move." They ran down the ridge, stumbling in darkness, trying to reach Rowan before Caleb's men did. Elena's lungs burned, her legs screamed, but she kept pushing. Behind her, Jackson kept pace, swearing under his breath in a steady stream that might have been prayer. They reached the pasture as the shooting started. Not heavy fire, just warning shots meant to stop the rustlers, or at least make them think twice. But warning shots could kill you just as dead if you got unlucky. Elena saw Rowan dive behind a water trough, saw Tommy go down, hit or just scared, she couldn't tell. Saw the Morrison boy scramble for cover. She didn't think. Just raised her rifle and fired toward the ranch house. High, not aiming to hit anyone, just trying to make them duck. The sound was enormous in the quiet night, and for a second everything stopped. Then all hell broke loose. Caleb's men returned fire, and now they were shooting to hit. Bullets whined through the air, kicked up dirt, punched through wood. Elena dropped flat, crawling toward where she'd seen Rowan. Jackson was beside her, adding his own shots to the chaos. "Go!" Rowan's voice cut through the gunfire. "Get to the horses!" They ran, all of them, scattered and stumbling, leaving the cattle stampeding into the darkness. Tommy was up again, bleeding from his arm but moving. The Morrison boy was limping, but they were all moving, all alive. They made it to the horses somehow, threw themselves into saddles, and rode like the devil himself was chasing them. Behind them, More shots, more shouting, the sound of pursuit. But they had the darkness, and they had desperation, and they had Rowan, who navigated by stars and instinct. They didn't stop until they were 5 miles gone, hidden in a canyon that swallowed sound. Only then did Rowan let them dismount, assess damage. Tommy's arm was grazed, nothing serious but painful. Morrison's boy had twisted his ankle. Everyone else was whole. That was stupid. Rowan's voice was shaking with something between rage and relief. Staying on watch was stupid, Elena. You could have been killed. So could you, she shot back. And you would have been if we hadn't pulled their fire. They stared at each other, both breathing hard, both furious for different reasons. Then Rowan pulled her into his arms, held her so tight she could barely breathe. Don't do that again, he whispered into her hair. Don't make me watch you almost die. Then don't almost die yourself. He laughed, the sound ragged. Fair enough. They rode home as dawn was breaking, exhausted and wired and alive in a way that felt almost indecent. Behind them, somewhere in the territory, Caleb Rourke was waking up to find his cattle scattered and his reputation damaged and his enemies still breathing. The war had started, and Elena discovered she wasn't afraid anymore. The retaliation came faster than expected. 2 days after the cattle scattered, Jack Morrison found his well poisoned. Not with anything that would kill you outright, Caleb was too smart for that, but with enough mineral salts to make the water undrinkable. His livestock got sick, and by the time they figured out what was wrong, he'd lost 4 head of cattle and a mule that had been in his family longer than his youngest son. They didn't even try to hide it. Morrison stood in Rowan's yard, hat in his hands, looking 10 years older than he had at the meeting. Found the bag floating right there in the water, like they wanted me to know. Rowan's jaw worked. How much to replace what you lost? More than I have. But that's not the point, is it? Point is, they're coming at us now, just like you said they would. We share water until yours clears out, Elena said before Rowan could respond. Our well's deep enough for both ranches if we're careful. Morrison looked at her, then at Rowan. That'll strain you too. So we all strain together. Rowan's voice was flat. That was the deal. They hit one of us, we all bear it. The next day it was Charlie Brennan's fence line. Cut in 12 places, cattle wandering onto the road, where passing wagons spooked them. It took him and his nephew 6 hours to round them up, and one cow broke its leg in a gully and had to be put down. The Martinez family lost their grain stores when someone broke into their barn at night and scattered feed across the ground, ruined it with dirt and manure. 3 months of winter supplies gone in one act of casual cruelty. It went on like that for a week. Small attacks, nothing big enough to bring the law in, nothing provable enough to pin on Caleb directly. But everyone knew. The message was clear. You stand with Rowan Hale, you pay the price. Some families folded. The Walshes pulled out first, old Henry showing up to mumble apologies about not being able to afford the fight anymore. 2 other families followed within days. The alliance that had felt so solid in Morrison's barn started looking thin and scared. We're losing them, Elena said one night, watching Rowan pace the floor like a caged animal. They're too afraid. Can't blame them. Caleb's playing this smart. Death by 1,000 cuts instead of one big fight. He stopped pacing, looked at her. If we don't hit back soon, we'll lose everyone. Hit back how? We can't prove any of this. Don't need to prove it. Just need to make it hurt. Rowan pulled out the map he'd been studying, the one with all the Rourke property marked in red. Caleb's got a lumber operation up north, cuts timber on land he doesn't own, sells it in Santa Fe for premium prices. No one complains because complaining about Caleb Rourke is bad for your health. You want to burn down his lumber camp? Want to and going to are different things, but yes. His finger traced a line on the map. It's isolated, maybe 6 men working it. We go in at night, scatter the workers, torch the whole thing, hit him where it hurts his wallet. Elena felt her stomach twist. Poisoning wells and cutting fences was one thing. Arson was something else, something that could get them hanged if they were caught. But she looked at Rowan's face, at the determination carved into every line, and knew he was right. They'd started this. Either they finished it, or Caleb finished them. When? Tomorrow night, you, me, Morrison, and his oldest boy, Tom Hendricks. 5 of us. He met her eyes. And before you argue about coming along, save your breath. I need you there. You're a better shot than half the men we've got, and you don't freeze. How do you know I won't freeze? Because you didn't when those men were shooting at us. You ran toward the gunfire, not away from it. His smile was grim. That's either courage or crazy, and either one works for what we need to do. They spent the next day preparing. Rowan made everyone practice moving quietly, working together, following orders without question. Tom Hendricks was solid, a man who'd been through enough that fear didn't shake him anymore. Morrison's boy, Robert, the oldest at 19, was less sure, but he had his father's stubbornness. You don't have to do this, Elena told Robert while they were checking rifles. You've got your whole life ahead of you. No shame in sitting this one out. My pa's well is still poisoned. Our cattle are still sick. Robert's young face was set hard. I'm going. That night, they rode out under a sky that threatened rain. The lumber camp was a 4-hour ride through country that got rougher the further north you went. By the time they reached the ridge overlooking the operation, it was past midnight and the first drops were starting to fall. Below them, the camp was quiet. 2 rough bunkhouses, a cook shack, and stacks of cut timber waiting to be hauled to Santa Fe. A single lamp burned in one of the bunkhouses, probably someone on watch. The rest would be sleeping. We go in quiet. Rowan's voice was barely above a whisper. Morrison, you and I take the bunkhouses. Wake them up gentle. Give them a chance to walk away. Elena and Tom, you're on the timber stacks. Get them burning fast and hot. Robert, you stay here with the horses and watch for trouble. I want to help, Robert started. You help by making sure we have a way out when this goes sideways. Rowan's tone left no room for argument. If you see riders coming, you fire 2 shots. We scatter and meet at the canyon we scouted. Everyone clear? They nodded. Elena checked her gun again, even though she'd checked it 3 times already. Her hands were shaking slightly, and she clenched them into fists to make it stop. Tom Hendricks noticed. First time's always the hardest. First time what? Crossing the line. Doing something you can't take back. He pulled out a flask, took a sip, offered it to her. After this, you'll be different. Just know that going in. Elena drank. The whiskey burned going down, settled warm in her stomach. Different how? You'll see things simpler. Right and wrong won't be so complicated anymore. He took the flask back. Your pa was a good man, but he thought too much, worried too much about doing things the proper way. Sometimes the proper way gets you killed. They moved down the ridge on foot, leaving the horses with Robert. The rain was picking up now, which was good. It would cover their noise, help the fire spread slower but burn hotter. Elena's heart hammered against her ribs as they approached the timber stacks. Rowan and Morrison split off toward the bunkhouses. Elena and Tom crouched behind the first stack of lumber, and Tom pulled out the oil-soaked rags they'd prepared. We light these, toss them under the stacks in 4 different places. Fire'll take hold before anyone can stop it. What if someone's still in there? Elena nodded toward the bunkhouses. What if they can't get out? Then Rowan and Morrison better work fast. Tom struck a match, the flame bright in the darkness. You having second thoughts? No. Elena took one of the burning rags. Let's do this. They worked quickly, stuffing the flaming cloth under the timber stacks where the wood was driest. The fire caught slowly at first, just smoke and a faint orange glow. Then it found the pitch in the pine logs, and suddenly it was alive, climbing and spreading like something hungry. Shouting from the bunkhouses, men stumbling out, confused and half-dressed. Rowan's voice cutting through the chaos. Fire! Get out now! He was giving them the chance to run, just like he'd said. Some did. Others stood there trying to process what was happening. Then someone recognized them. It's Hale! Rowan Hale! The shout went up, and suddenly chaos turned to violence. A shot rang out. Elena didn't see who fired first, but it didn't matter. The night exploded with gunfire. She dropped behind the burning timber stack, feeling the heat on her back as bullets whined overhead. Tom was beside her, returning fire, his face set and grim in the firelight. Elena? Rowan's voice. Get to the horses. But between them and the ridge were Caleb's men, more awake now and organized. 6 of them, just like Rowan had said, but 6 men with rifles were enough to pin them down. Elena saw Morrison go down, grabbed his leg and fell. Rowan grabbed him, started dragging him toward cover. She didn't think, just stood up and started shooting, not aiming for men, but for the ground near their feet, the walls beside their heads, anything to make them duck and give Rowan time to get Morrison to safety. Tom saw what she was doing and joined in, both of them laying down cover fire that was more noise than accuracy but effective enough. Then her rifle clicked empty. For a second, Elena just stared at it stupidly, her mind not quite processing. Then Tom shoved her. Run! They ran. Through smoke and rain and chaos, past burning timber that cracked and groaned as the fire consumed it. Elena's lungs screamed, her legs felt like water, but she kept moving. Behind them, more shots, more shouting. Morrison was being half-carried by Rowan, his face twisted in pain. They scrambled up the ridge where Robert waited with the horses, eyes wide with fear. Mount up! Rowan threw Morrison onto his horse, swung up behind him. Go! Now! They rode hard, the fire lighting up the sky behind them like a false dawn. Elena risked one look back and saw the entire lumber camp engulfed, flames reaching toward the rain-dark sky. Months of work, thousands of dollars, gone. And possibly men, too, if anyone had been too stubborn or too slow to get clear. She tried not to think about that. They didn't stop until they were back in the canyon, hidden in darkness, with the rain coming down hard enough to wash away their tracks. Morrison was in bad shape. The bullet had gone through his calf, messy, but not fatal if they could stop the bleeding. Tom worked on him with hands that shook only slightly, packing the wound with cloth torn from someone's shirt. Did we get everyone out? Elena asked Rowan. I think so. Counted 6 men running. That's what we expected. But his voice was uncertain, and she knew he was thinking the same thing she was. In the chaos and smoke and gunfire, it was impossible to be sure. I saw them all clear, Tom said without looking up from Morrison's leg. All 6. They ran south, away from the fire. The relief that flooded through Elena was almost painful. They'd done something terrible, but at least they hadn't killed anyone. At least there was a line they hadn't crossed yet. Caleb's going to lose his mind. Morrison's voice was tight with pain. This is way past fence cutting. We just cost him serious money. Good. Rowan's voice was cold. Let him lose his mind. Angry men make mistakes. They got Morrison back to his ranch as the sun was coming up, the rain finally easing off. His wife Sarah met them at the door, took one look at her husband's bloody leg, and went pale. But she didn't scream or cry, just started boiling water and gathering bandages like she'd done this before. Maybe she had. Thank you. Morrison grabbed Rowan's hand before they left. For getting me out. We don't leave people behind. Rowan's expression was hard. That's what makes us different from Caleb. On the ride back to their own ranch, Elena finally let herself feel the fear she'd been holding back. Her whole body started shaking, teeth chattering even though it wasn't that cold. Rowan pulled his horse alongside hers, put a hand on her arm. You did good tonight. I froze. When my gun was empty, I just stood there like an idiot. For 2 seconds. Then you ran. That's not freezing. That's just being human. He squeezed her arm. Elena, you saved Morrison's life. You and Tom gave me the time I needed to get him clear. That's what matters. I could have gotten killed. Yeah, you could have. He didn't sugarcoat it. But you didn't. And now Caleb knows we're not just defending anymore. We're bringing the fight to him. News of the fire spread fast. By noon, half the territory knew about it. The sheriff, Tom Hendricks, who everyone knew was probably on Caleb's payroll, rode out to ask questions, but nobody had seen anything. Funny how that worked. Rowan had alibis from 3 different neighbors who swore he'd been helping them with various ranch work all night. The neighbors were lying, but they did it with straight faces and signed statements. Caleb didn't ride out personally. He sent Mason instead, and Mason brought 10 men with him. They showed up at the ranch 3 days after the fire, spreading out in a line that was meant to be intimidating. Elena met them from the porch, rifle across her lap. Rowan was in the barn, watching through the door. They'd planned for this. Caleb's response, his attempt to scare them into submission. Elena Cross. Mason stayed on his horse, looking down at her. Or Hale, I guess. You know why we're here. Can't imagine. Don't play stupid. Your husband burned down our lumber camp, cost us $20,000 and nearly killed 6 men. That's terrible. You should report it to the sheriff. Mason's smile was ugly. We're past sheriffs now, way past. You tell Rowan he's got one chance to make this right. He comes to the Rourke Ranch, takes his punishment like a man, and maybe we let you keep this place. What kind of punishment? The kind that leaves scars. Mason leaned forward in his saddle. Caleb's feeling generous, so he won't kill him. Just make sure he remembers what happens when you steal from us, when you burn our property. Elena felt the rage building, hot and clean. Get off my land. Or what? You'll shoot me? You don't have the... She fired. Not at Mason, but close enough that his horse reared and nearly threw him. The other men reached for their guns, but Rowan stepped out of the barn with his rifle leveled. She said, "Get off her land." His voice carried across the yard. "You're trespassing." For a long moment, it could have gone either way. 10 men against 2, but those 2 were on their own property with good cover and the will to use it. Mason's men looked nervous, like they hadn't signed up for an actual gunfight. Finally, Mason got his horse under control. "You're making a mistake, Hale." "Probably. But it's my mistake to make." They rode off, but everyone knew this wasn't over. It was escalating now, moving toward the kind of violence you couldn't take back. That night, Rowan slept in the bed for the first time. Not because Elena invited him exactly, but because after Mason's visit, after the fire and the shooting and the constant tension, she didn't want to be alone. He climbed in beside her fully clothed, staying on top of the blankets, and they lay there in the darkness, listening to each other breathe. "Are we going to die?" Elena asked finally. "Probably not." That's not reassuring. Wasn't meant to be reassuring. Was meant to be honest. He rolled onto his side facing her. "There's a chance this goes bad. A chance Caleb comes at us with everything he's got, and we can't stop him. But there's also a chance we win, that we break his hold on this territory and build something better. What if the price is too high? Then we pay it anyway." Rowan's hand found hers under the blankets. "Because the alternative is living on our knees, and I'd rather die on my feet." Elena thought about that. About her father, who died fighting even though the fight was killing him. About her mother, who'd given up and lost herself. There wasn't a good choice, she realized, just different ways of breaking. "I'm scared," she admitted. "Good. Means you're not stupid." He squeezed her hand. "I'm scared too, but I'm more scared of what happens if we quit now." She rolled toward him, close enough to feel the warmth of his body. "Make me a promise." "What kind of promise?" "That if this goes wrong, if we're about to lose everything, you'll run. Take whatever you can and get out. Don't die for this ranch." Rowan was quiet for a long time. "I can't promise that." "Why not?" "Because if we're about to lose everything, it means you're in danger. And I'm not leaving you, Elena. Not for the ranch. Not for my life. Not for anything." His voice was rough with emotion. "I know this started as an arrangement, a bargain made by desperate men. But somewhere along the way, it became real for me. You became real." Elena's heart stuttered. "Rowan, you don't have to say anything, don't have to feel the same way. I just need you to know that I'm here because I choose to be, not because my father made some deal." He brought her hand to his lips, kissed her knuckles. "So no, I won't promise to run, but I will promise to fight like hell to keep us both alive." She didn't know what to say to that. Didn't know if what she felt was love or just the intensity of everything they'd been through. But she knew she didn't want him on top of the blankets anymore. Didn't want the space between them. "Get under the covers," she said quietly. "Elena, you don't... I'm not asking for anything except warmth and company, but I want you here. Really here." She pulled back the blanket. "Please." He slid in beside her and they lay facing each other in the darkness. It wasn't the wedding night they'd never had. Wasn't anything beyond 2 people seeking comfort in a hard world. But it felt like something shifting, like a door opening that had been closed. Elena fell asleep with her head on his shoulder and his arm around her waist. And for the first time in months, she didn't dream about her father dying or her mother fading. She dreamed about sunrise over land that belonged to her, about cattle that thrived and crops that grew and a future that was possible. She woke to the smell of smoke. For a confused second, she thought she was back at the lumber camp, watching it burn. Then she realized the smoke was real, was here, was coming from somewhere close. Rowan was already up, already moving toward the window. "The barn!" His voice was flat with rage. "They're burning the barn!" Elena scrambled out of bed, grabbed the rifle that was never far from reach. Through the window, she could see flames climbing the barn's north wall, orange and hungry in the pre-dawn darkness. And silhouetted against the fire, men on horses, watching, making sure it burned. "How many?" She was already loading the rifle. 4 that I can see, maybe more. Rowan checked his own weapon. They're making a statement, burning the barn where I slept, where this all started. What do? We make them regret it. They burst out of the house firing, not aiming to kill necessarily, but to drive the watchers back, to keep them from spreading the fire to the house or other buildings. The men scattered, returning fire as they went. Elena hit one horse, felt sick about it immediately, and the rider went down hard. The barn was fully engulfed now, flames reaching 30 feet high. Inside, their supplies, their tools, months of stored hay, all of it burning. Elena felt tears of rage streaming down her face as she fired again and again. Then Sarah Cross appeared on the porch in her nightgown, holding a bucket of water like she was going to fight a barn fire with one bucket. "Thomas!" she screamed. "Thomas, the barn!" She thought her husband was in there, thought he was burning alive. "Mama, no!" Elena dropped her rifle, ran to grab her mother before she could run toward the flames. Sarah fought her with surprising strength, screaming for a man who'd been dead for over a year. Rowan kept firing, driving the last of Caleb's men back into the darkness. When they were gone, he lowered his rifle and just stood there watching their barn burn. His face was a mask of fury and grief, and Elena knew he was thinking about everything they'd lost, everything they'd have to replace with money they didn't have. She got her mother back into the house, sat her down, tried to calm the hysteria. But Sarah had broken something in her mind, crossed some line, and she kept crying for Thomas, kept asking where he was. Why wasn't he stopping the fire? By the time the sun came up, the barn was just smoking timbers and ash. Most of their stored feed was gone. The tools they'd need for spring planting, gone. The progress they'd made fixing things up, erased. Rowan sat on the porch steps, covered in soot, staring at the ruins. Elena sat down beside him. "We can rebuild," she said. "With what money? We used everything we had just to keep going through winter." His voice was hollow. "This was the point, Elena. This is what Caleb wanted. Hurt us bad enough that we can't recover. So we asked the others for help. Pool resources, rebuild together. The others are barely hanging on themselves. Morrison's well is still bad. Martinez lost their feed. Brennan's stretched so thin you can see through him." Rowan turned to look at her, and his eyes were defeated in a way she'd never seen. "Maybe we should have just sold out, taken what we could get, and walked away." "You don't mean that." "Don't I? What have we gained, Elena? We burned his lumber camp and he burned our barn. We scattered his cattle and he poisoned Morrison's well. All we're doing is destroying each other." He stood up, paced away. "Your father was smart to make that arrangement. At least you would have had something. Now you've got nothing but a husband who dragged you into a war you can't win." Elena felt the anger rise, sharp and clean. "Don't you dare." "Don't I dare what?" "Give up. Not now. Not after everything we've done." She stood up, got in his face. "You think I wanted this? You think I asked for an arranged marriage to a man I'd never met? I didn't. But I made the best of it. I stood beside you, fought beside you, and I'm not quitting now just because we took a hit." "This isn't just a hit, Elena. This is what war looks like," she was shouting now. "You said it yourself. We fight until one side breaks. Well, I'm not broken. Are you?" Rowan stared at her, something shifting in his expression. "No, I'm not broken." "Then stop acting like we've lost. We haven't lost until we quit." Elena grabbed his shirt, held on. "You told me you'd fight like hell to keep us alive, so fight. We rebuild the barn. We replace the supplies. We keep going." "How?" "I don't know yet. But we figure it out." She pressed her forehead against his chest. "Together." His arms came around her, held her tight. They stood there in the ash and smoke and ruins, holding each other up, and Elena felt something crystallize inside her. This wasn't about the ranch anymore. Wasn't about her father's debt, or Caleb's bullying, or even survival. This was about refusing to be beaten, about standing up and saying no to men who thought they could take whatever they wanted. "All right," Rowan's voice was rough. "All right, we fight." The news of the barn burning spread like the fire itself. By midday, people started showing up. Jack Morrison came first, bringing his sons and every able-bodied man he could gather. "We rebuild," he said simply, "today." Charlie Brennan showed up with lumber scraps and nails. The Martinez family brought food and water. Even Sarah Hendricks appeared with bandages and ointment for burns. One by one, the families they'd brought together came, and they worked. It wasn't charity, it was survival. Because everyone knew if Caleb could burn down Rowan and Elena's barn, he could burn down anyone's. They were all in this now, whether they'd wanted to be or not. By nightfall, they had the beginnings of a new frame-up. It wasn't pretty, and it wouldn't be done for weeks, but it was progress. It was refusal. It was all of them together saying they wouldn't be broken. Elena worked alongside them, hammering nails until her hands bled, hauling boards until her shoulders screamed. Rowan was everywhere at once, directing the work, encouraging people, making sure the structure would hold. And slowly, impossibly, the barn started to rise from the ashes. That night, exhausted and filthy and in pain, Elena and Rowan collapsed into bed. They didn't talk, didn't need to, just held each other in the darkness and let the ache in their muscles be a reminder that they were still here, still fighting, still alive. In the morning, there would be more work, more threats, more violence, probably. But tonight, they had this, the warmth of each other's bodies and the knowledge that they weren't alone anymore. The war was far from over, but they hadn't lost yet, and Elena was starting to believe they might actually win. The week after the barn raising was the quietest they'd had in months, and that made Elena more nervous than the violence had. Caleb Rourke wasn't the type to just accept a loss and move on. He was planning something, gathering his strength, and the silence felt like the moment before lightning struck. Rowan felt it too. He started sleeping lighter, keeping his gun closer, checking the perimeter of the property twice a day instead of once. The other ranchers did the same, all of them waiting for the hammer to fall. It fell on a Tuesday morning when Jack Morrison's youngest son rode in hard, his horse lathered and wild-eyed. They took him. The boy, Samuel, barely 14, could hardly get the words out. They took Robert. Elena's stomach dropped. Who took him? Caleb? Don't know. Men with masks. Came at dawn, grabbed Robert out of the barn, rode off north. Samuel was crying now, embarrassed by it, but unable to stop. Pa sent me here, said you'd know what to do. Rowan was already moving, grabbing rifles, ammunition, his saddlebag. How many men? 5, maybe 6. They were too fast, I couldn't, but... It's all right, son. You did good coming here. Rowan's voice was gentle despite the fury Elena could see in his eyes. Elena, stay here with your mother. I'm going after them. The hell you are. Elena was loading her own rifle. Not alone, you're not. Someone needs to stay with the ranch. Then we get Tom Hendricks or Charlie Brennan to watch it. But I'm coming with you. She met his eyes, daring him to argue. Robert stood with us at the lumber camp. We stand with him now. Rowan looked like he wanted to fight her on it, but they didn't have time. He nodded once, sharp. Get your horse. We leave in 5 minutes. They rode to Morrison's place first, found Jack organizing a search party with grim efficiency. His face was carved from stone, but his hands shook when he loaded his rifle. They want me to come alone. Morrison showed them a note that had been left behind, crude letters cut from newspaper. Say they'll kill him if I bring help. It's a trap, Rowan said flatly. They take you. They've got leverage over everyone. You go alone, you're dead, and Robert's dead. So what do I do? My boy's out there. We go together, all of us. But smart, not stupid. Rowan spread out his map on Morrison's table. They went north, you said? That's rough country. Lots of places to hide, but also lots of places where you can see someone coming from miles away. Tom Hendricks arrived with 3 men from his family. Charlie Brennan showed up with his nephew Tommy, the kid's arm still bandaged from the lumber camp, but his jaw set hard. One by one, they gathered. Not an army, but enough. 12 men and Elena, all armed, all angry. They're expecting Jack alone. Rowan addressed the group. So we give them what they expect. Jack rides in plain sight, following whatever trail they left. The rest of us split into 3 groups, come at the position from different angles. When we have them surrounded, we negotiate. And if they won't negotiate, Morrison's voice was tight. Then we take Robert back by force. Rowan's expression left no room for doubt. But we try talking first. They want leverage, which means they want him alive. That gives us options. They rode out in formation, Jack Morrison taking the obvious trail north while the rest of them split off into the rough country on either side. Elena rode with Rowan and Tom Hendricks, picking their way through rocks and scrub that tore at their clothes and the horses' legs. The sun climbed higher, turning the landscape into something that shimmered with heat. Elena's mouth was dry, her back ached from the saddle, but she kept moving. Somewhere out here, a 19-year-old kid who'd stood with them was being held by men who wouldn't hesitate to kill him if it served their purpose. They found the camp around noon, tucked into a box canyon with only one way in or out. Smart positioning if you weren't expecting to be surrounded. But Rowan had sent Charlie Brennan and his group around the back, climbing the canyon walls to get above the position. Morrison was approaching from the front, and Rowan's group was coming in from the east, using the sun at their backs. Through Rowan's telescope, Elena could see Robert tied to a post in the center of the camp. He was alive, conscious, and looked mostly unharmed. 6 men lounged around him, relaxed like they were on a hunting trip. None of them wore masks now. They weren't expecting witnesses to live long enough to identify them. "I know 3 of those men," Elena whispered. "The one on the left is Caleb's foreman. The big one by the fire is Jeremiah Rourke. The rest are hired guns from what I can tell." "Jeremiah?" Rowan's voice was disgusted. "So Caleb sent family to do this. Wants us to know it's personal." They waited until everyone was in position, watching for the signals. A flash of mirror from Charlie's position. A hat wave from Morrison's approach. When they came, Rowan cupped his hands and shouted across the canyon. "Jeremiah Rourke! You're surrounded! Let the boy go and we'll let you leave." The camp erupted in chaos. Men scrambling for weapons, trying to figure out where the voice had come from. Jeremiah grabbed Robert, put a knife to his throat. "Show yourself, Hale! I know that's you." "I'm here." Rowan stood up from behind the rocks, rifle ready but not aimed. "And I've got 12 guns on you right now. Look up." Jeremiah did, saw Charlie and his men on the canyon rim with rifles pointed down. His face went pale. "You're bluffing." "Am I? Fire a shot? Find out how fast my men turn you into Swiss cheese." Rowan's voice was calm, almost conversational. "Or you can let Robert go right out of here and we all live to see tomorrow. Your choice." "Caleb will kill me if I come back without leverage." "Then maybe you shouldn't have taken the job." Rowan took a step forward. "Last chance, Jeremiah. Let him go." Let him. For a long moment it hung in balance. Elena held her breath, finger on her trigger, ready to fire if Jeremiah so much as twitched that knife. The other men in the camp were looking at each other, doing the math, realizing they were outgunned and outmaneuvered. Finally, Jeremiah lowered the knife. "Cut him loose." One of the hired guns moved to Robert, cut the ropes. The kid stumbled but stayed on his feet, started moving toward Morrison's position. "Weapons on the ground," Rowan ordered. "All of them. Then mount up and ride." They complied, moving slow and resentful, but complying. Jeremiah was the last to disarm, dropping his knife and gun like they physically hurt to release. As he swung into his saddle, he looked straight at Rowan. "This ain't over. Caleb's going to what?" Rowan cut him off. "Keep sending his brothers to do jobs they can't finish? Keep hiring men who fold the second they're outmatched?" He walked closer, close enough that Jeremiah's horse shied. "You tell Caleb that if he wants this fight, he needs to bring it himself. Stop hiding behind family and hired guns and bring it himself." Jeremiah's face twisted with rage, but he didn't respond. Just spurred his horse and rode out, his men following. They watched until the riders disappeared into the heat shimmer, making sure they were really gone. Then Morrison was running to his son, pulling Robert into a hug that probably hurt, but the kid didn't complain. Jack was crying, no shame in it, just relief pouring out. And Robert was apologizing, saying he should have been more careful, should have seen them coming. "Hush!" Morrison held his son at arm's length. "You're alive. That's all that matters." They rode back together, everyone exhausted but victorious. They'd won this round without firing a shot, without losing anyone. It felt like progress, like maybe they were learning how to fight smart instead of just fighting hard. But Elena couldn't shake the feeling that they'd just made things exponentially worse. Caleb Rourke proved her right 3 days later when the summons came. It wasn't delivered by one of his men. It came through the sheriff, official and legal, typed up on court letterhead from Santa Fe. The territory was charging Rowan Hale with arson, destruction of property, and endangering lives. The lumber camp fire. They were finally making it official. "This is ridiculous." Elena read the summons over Rowan's shoulder. "They can't prove anything." "They don't have to prove it. Rowan's voice was weary. They just have to make me come to Santa Fe to fight it. Get me away from the ranch, away from you, stuck in a courtroom where Caleb's friends can make my life miserable. So don't go. If I don't go, they issue a warrant. Send federal marshals. That's a fight we can't win, Elena. He folded the paper, tucked it in his pocket. I have to go. Then I'm coming with you. No. You need to stay here, hold things together. If we both leave, Caleb will move on the ranch immediately. Rowan gripped her shoulders. I'll take Tom Hendricks with me. He knows people in Santa Fe, can help me find a lawyer who isn't on Caleb's payroll, but you need to be here. Elena wanted to argue, but she knew he was right. The ranch, the alliance, everything they'd built, it needed someone to keep it running. And with her mother's condition worsening daily, someone needed to be here for Sarah too. How long will you be gone? A week, maybe 2? Depends on how fast we can get this dismissed. He pulled her close. You'll be all right. You're stronger than you think. I don't feel strong. No one does. But you do it anyway. He kissed her forehead, gentle. That's what courage is. They left the next morning, Rowan and Tom riding out before dawn with enough supplies for 2 weeks and enough ammunition for a small war. Elena watched them go from the porch, her mother beside her in rare lucidity. He'll come back, Sarah said quietly. You don't know that. I know he loves you. That's enough to bring a man home. Her mother's hand found hers. Your father loved me, but he loved this land more. Rowan's different. He'd burn it all down if it meant keeping you safe. Elena looked at her mother, saw a flash of the woman she used to be. When did you get so wise? I've always been wise, just been too sad to show it. Sarah squeezed her hand. Take care of things while he's gone. Don't let the vultures circle. The vultures started circling that very afternoon. Mason Rourke showed up alone, which was either brave or stupid. He sat on his horse at the property line, not crossing onto their land but making his presence known. Come to gloat? Elena called from the porch, rifle in her lap. Come to talk business. Mason dismounted, kept his hands visible. Your husband's going to prison, Elena. Caleb's got witnesses who'll swear they saw him at that lumber camp. Got evidence, testimony, everything he needs. So? So you're about to be alone on this ranch with no money and no help. Winter's coming. You'll lose everything. He took a step closer. Unless you're smart. Smart how? Sell to us now. Caleb's willing to pay fair price. More than fair, considering. You walk away with enough to start over somewhere else. Somewhere your husband's name won't be dirt. Mason's smile was almost kind, which made it more dangerous. This is mercy, Elena. More than you deserve after everything you've done. Mercy. Elena stood up, walked to the edge of the porch. Is that what you call it when you burn someone's barn? Poison their wells? Kidnap their sons? We're just defending what's ours. This ranch isn't yours. Never was. And it never will be. She raised the rifle, not quite pointing it at him, but close. Now get off my property before I decide you're trespassing. Mason's expression hardened. You're making a mistake. Probably. But it's my mistake to make. He mounted up, but before riding off, he turned back. Caleb wanted me to tell you something. He says he's been patient because of your father's memory. But his patience is up. Whatever happens next, remember you had a chance to walk away. Elena watched him go, then sat down hard on the porch steps. Her hands were shaking. Mason had been right about one thing. She was alone now, or close to it. The neighboring ranchers would help if she asked, but they had their own problems. And with Rowan gone, the target on her back just got bigger. That night, she barely slept. Every sound was a threat. Every shadow a potential attacker. She kept the rifle next to the bed and a pistol under her pillow, and she listened to her mother's breathing from the next room like it was the only thing tethering her to sanity. Morning came gray and cold. Elena was in the barn checking on the horses when she heard the rider approach. She grabbed her rifle, stepped out ready to fight. It was a stranger. Young, maybe 25, with the lean look of someone who'd ridden far. He had his hands up, showing he wasn't armed. Mrs. Hale? Elena Hale? Who's asking? Name's Daniel Price. I'm a lawyer from Santa Fe. Rowan hired me to come check on you, make sure you were all right. Elena lowered the rifle slightly. How do I know you're telling the truth? He said you'd ask that. Said to tell you. Daniel pulled out a paper, read from it. Tell her the first night I slept in the house, she gave me a blanket that smelled like sage and told me not to track mud on her clean floors. Elena felt something loosen in her chest. Only Rowan would remember that detail. He's all right then? He's fine. Trial's set for next week. We've got a decent case for dismissal, but it'll take time. Daniel dismounted. He asked me to stay here until he gets back. Help with the ranch work, provide another gun if needed. I don't need charity. Good thing I'm not offering charity. I'm offering practical help from a man who's worried about his wife. Daniel smiled. Besides, I grew up on a ranch. I can actually be useful. Elena studied him, trying to figure out if this was some trick. But his eyes were honest, and he had that paper with Rowan's words on it, and she was tired of being suspicious of everything. All right, you can stay in the barn. I know what you've got. Rowan filled me in. Daniel started unsaddling his horse. He also said you'd try to do everything yourself, and I should ignore that and help anyway. Despite everything, Elena smiled. He knows me too well. He talks about you like you hung the moon. I figured I should come see what kind of woman inspires that. And you're pointing a rifle at a man who's trying to help you. I'd say Rowan's got good taste. Daniel turned out to be as useful as promised. He knew his way around horses and cattle, could fix things that broke, and didn't mind the hard work that came with keeping a ranch running. He was also company, which Elena hadn't realized she needed until she had it. You married? She asked him one evening while they were fixing fence. Was. She died 2 years ago. Cholera. He didn't look up from the wire he was stringing. We were only married 6 months. I'm sorry. Me too. But that's how it goes out here. You love people knowing you might lose them, and you lose them knowing at least you love them. He pulled the wire tight. Rowan said you two started as an arrangement. We did. But it's not an arrangement anymore. Elena thought about how to answer that. No, it's not. That's good. Life's too short for marriages that feel like business contracts. Daniel moved to the next post. Though I suppose all marriages are business contracts in a way. Just depends on what you're trading. What were you trading? You and your wife? Loneliness for company, fear for courage, the weight of carrying everything alone for someone to help bear the load. He looked at her. Same as you and Rowan, I'd imagine. Yeah, same as us. Word came 3 days later that the trial had been postponed, some technicality about witness availability, but everyone knew it was just Caleb drawing things out, keeping Rowan stuck in Santa Fe while he made his move here. The move came that night. Elena woke to Daniel shaking her shoulder. Get up, we've got company. She grabbed her rifle, followed him to the window. Outside in the moonlight, she could count at least 20 riders spread out in a semicircle around the house. Too many to fight. Too many to scare off with threats. They're not attacking, Daniel observed. Just sitting there. They're making a point, showing us we're surrounded, outnumbered. Elena's mind raced. They want us to know we're helpless. As if to prove her right, Caleb Rourke himself rode forward. She could see him clearly in the moonlight, a big man on a bigger horse, radiating confidence and power. Elena Cross, he called out. I want to talk. It's Hale, she shouted back. Elena Hale. Fine, Elena Hale. I want to talk, just you and me. No guns, no tricks. Why should I trust you? Because if I wanted you dead, you'd already be dead. Caleb spread his hands. I'm trying to avoid bloodshed here. Give you one last chance to be reasonable. Elena looked at Daniel. What do you think? I think it's a trap, but I also think we don't have a lot of options. He checked his rifle. I'll cover you from the window. He tries anything, I'll drop him. You'll die. Probably, but so will he. Daniel's smile was grim. Sometimes that's enough. Elena walked out onto the porch, leaving her rifle inside but keeping the pistol tucked in the back of her belt. Caleb dismounted, walked toward her with that same easy confidence. Up close, he was bigger than she'd thought, and older, maybe 45, with gray in his hair and lines around his eyes. You look like your mother, he said conversationally. She was a beautiful woman before this place broke her. Get to the point. The point is this ends one of two ways. Your husband gets convicted, and he will, I've made sure of that, and you lose this ranch to the bank. Or you sell to me now, take the money, and start somewhere fresh, somewhere without all this history and violence. Caleb's voice was almost kind. I'm not a monster, Elena. I'm a businessman, and this fight is bad for business. Then stop fighting. I can't. Not until I control the water rights on this land. Your property sits on the best aquifer in the territory. I need it to expand my operation. He stepped closer. But I'm willing to pay for it. $1,500. More than enough to get you and your mother set up somewhere nice. $1,500. It was more than the ranch was worth, more than her father's debt, more than she'd probably see in her lifetime. Enough to start over, to get her mother proper care, to leave all this violence and fear behind. For a moment, she actually considered it. Then she thought about her father dying in the doorway of this house because he couldn't bear to leave it. About Rowan facing prison rather than abandon her. About Morrison and Brennan and all the families who'd stood with them because someone finally gave them hope that things could be different. No. Caleb's expression didn't change. That's your final answer? That's my final answer. Then you're a fool. He turned to walk back to his horse. I tried, Elena. Remember that. When everything falls apart, when you're burying the people you love, remember I gave you a way out and you chose this. I'll remember. Elena's hand moved to the pistol at her back. I'll also remember every family you've destroyed, every well you've poisoned, every barn you've burned. And when we win, and we will win, I'll make sure everyone knows what kind of man you really are. Caleb paused, looked back at her. For the first time, she saw something in his eyes besides confidence. Not fear exactly, but calculation, like he was reassessing the threat she posed. We'll see. He mounted his horse. I'll give you 2 weeks. 2 weeks to change your mind before I make my final move. After that, there's no more talking. He rode off, his men following like a dark wave receding. Elena stood on the porch until they were gone, until she couldn't even hear the hoofbeats anymore. Then she went inside and threw up in the kitchen basin, her whole body shaking with fear and adrenaline and the weight of what she'd just done. Daniel found her there. You all right? No, but I will be. She wiped her mouth. We need to send word to the others. Tell them Caleb's planning something big in 2 weeks. We need to be ready. Ready how? I don't know yet, but we're going to figure it out. She spent the next day riding to every ranch in their alliance, warning them about Caleb's deadline. Most of them were scared. Some wanted to pull out, but Morrison and Brennan held firm. We're with you, Morrison said simply. Whatever comes. Elena also sent a message to Rowan through Daniel's contacts in Santa Fe. 3 words. Come home soon. The response came back 2 days later. Rowan had gotten the trial expedited, was pushing for a verdict within the week. His lawyer thought they had a good chance at dismissal. The witnesses Caleb had were unreliable, the evidence circumstantial. But even if they won, it would be close. Meanwhile, Elena prepared for war. She inventoried their ammunition, reinforced the doors and windows, made sure the well had enough water stored for a siege. Daniel helped, never questioning, never suggesting she was overreacting. You've done this before, she observed, watching him set up firing positions. Once. Different territory, different fight, but same principle. Rich man trying to take from poor folks who had nowhere else to go. He tested a shudder. We lost that one. Everyone scattered or died. I don't want to see that happen again. It won't. Not this time. You sound sure. I'm not sure. But I'm stubborn. Elena checked the rifle's sight. And I'm tired of running from bullies. Sarah Cross surprised everyone by being the most helpful. In her lucid moments, which came more frequently now that crisis was looming, she remembered things from when Thomas was alive, where he'd hidden extra ammunition, which neighbors owed him favors, how to make the house defensible. Your father knew this day would come, Maud, Sarah told Elena one evening. He prepared for it, made me promise that if he wasn't here, I'd make sure you knew how to fight. I thought you gave up after he died. I did. But watching you stand up to them, it reminded me why we stayed, why we fought. Sarah's eyes were clear for the first time in months. I'm sorry I wasn't stronger for you. Mama, no, let me say it. I let the grief consume me. Let it make me useless when you needed me most. But I'm here now. She gripped Elena's hand. And I won't let you face this alone. The days crawled by. Elena counted them obsessively. 12 days until Caleb's deadline, then 11, then 10. Each morning she woke expecting to find riders on the horizon, Each night she went to bed wondering if she'd wake up to gunfire. On day 8, a telegram came from Santa Fe. Trial concluded. Not guilty. Rowan coming home. Elena read it 3 times before believing it. He'd won. They'd actually won. The relief made her knees weak. But the relief was short-lived because on day 9, Jack Morrison's ranch burned. Not just the barn this time. Everything. The house, the outbuildings, the corrals. Morrison and his family barely got out alive, and only because one of his sons smelled smoke early and woke everyone. They rode to Elena's ranch with nothing but the clothes they were wearing and the horses they'd fled on. They didn't even hide it. Morrison's face was hollow with shock. Just rode in at sunset, lit torches, and set everything ablaze. When I tried to stop them, they pointed guns at my boys, said they'd kill them if I didn't back off. How many? 15, maybe 20. Jeremiah Rourke led them, said this was a message from Caleb. Morrison looked at Elena with dead eyes. I'm done. I can't fight anymore. My boys almost died tonight. I understand. And she did. Morrison had lost everything. No one could expect him to keep fighting after that. But I'm not leaving the territory. Morrison's voice strengthened. I'm staying with my sister in town, and when this is over, when you beat Caleb, I'm rebuilding, because I'll be damned if I let him have my land without a fight, even if the fight's over. Word spread fast. Morrison's ranch burning was meant to terrify everyone, to show what happened when you stood against Caleb Rourke. And it worked. By the end of day 9, half their alliance had pulled out. Couldn't blame them. They had families to think about, lives to protect. That left Elena, the Hendricks family, Charlie Brennan, and the Martinez brothers. 6 families against Caleb's army. On day 10, Rowan came home. Elena saw him riding up the road and ran to meet him, not caring how it looked, not caring about dignity or propriety. She just ran, and when he dismounted, she threw herself into his arms and held on like drowning. I'm here. He held her just as tight. I'm here. It's all right. It's not all right. Morrison's ranch burned. We've lost half our people. Caleb's coming in 4 days, and I don't know how to stop him. The words tumbled out between sobs she couldn't control. Rowan pulled back, looked at her face. Then we make our stand, right here. All of us who are left, we make him pay for every inch he takes. We'll lose. Maybe, but we'll lose together. He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. And who knows? Maybe we'll win. Stranger things have happened. That night, they called a meeting of everyone who was left. In the partially rebuilt barn, in the lamplight, Rowan laid out the situation with brutal honesty. In 4 days, Caleb is coming with everything he's got. He's going to try to break us, kill us if necessary, drive us out at minimum. We're outnumbered, outgunned, and alone. He paused. Anyone who wants to leave, now's the time. No judgment. This is going to be bad. Nobody moved. All right then, here's what we're going to do. He spent the next 3 hours planning. Where they'd make their stand, how they'd defend, what they'd do if Caleb tried to burn them out like he had Morrison. It was meticulous and practical and acknowledged the very real possibility they'd all die. When everyone finally left, Elena and Rowan sat alone in the barn. You should have told them the truth, she said quietly. What truth? That we're probably going to die. That this is suicide. They know. They're not stupid. Rowan took her hand. But sometimes knowing you're going to lose and fighting anyway is the point. It's about refusing to go quietly, refusing to let men like Caleb decide our fate without a fight. Is that what this is? A statement? No, it's a war. He pulled her close. And wars get won by people too stubborn to quit. Elena rested her head on his shoulder, breathed in the smell of him, dust and sweat and horse and something essentially Rowan. I love you. She felt him go still. What? I love you. I should have said it sooner, but I was scared. Scared it would make losing you worse. She looked up at him. But I'd rather die having said it than live wishing I had. Rowan's eyes were bright with something that might have been tears. I love you too. I've since you faced down Mason in town and didn't blink, maybe even before that. They made love that night, desperate and tender and real. It wasn't the careful, polite joining of strangers trying to do their duty. It was 2 people who knew they might die in 4 days, claiming whatever happiness they could in the time they had left. Afterwards, lying in the darkness, Elena asked the question she'd been avoiding. What happens if we lose? We die. Or we run. Depends on how it goes. And if we win? Then we rebuild. Make this territory into something better than what Caleb had it. Make it a place where families can work their land without fear. Rowan stroked her hair. Make it somewhere our children could grow up safe. Children. Elena tested the word. You want children? Someday? If we live through this. If you want them too. I do. She pressed her hand against her stomach, where maybe, just maybe, new life was already starting. They'd been careless tonight, too caught up in each other to think about consequences. But the possible consequence didn't scare her the way it once would have. I want everything with you, Rowan. The boring stuff and the hard stuff and everything in between. Then we make sure we survive to have it. The next 3 days were a blur of preparation. They brought everyone to Elena's ranch. It was the most defensible position, with good sight lines and water. They stockpiled ammunition, food, anything they might need for a siege. The Martinez brothers brought a wagon full of supplies. The Hendricks family brought their oldest son, just turned 16 and eager to prove himself. Daniel stayed too, despite Elena telling him he could leave. I came here to help. Haven't helped enough yet. Sarah Cross was the biggest surprise. She walked out of her fog of grief and became the woman Elena remembered from childhood. Sharp, practical, unafraid. She took charge of medical supplies, made sure everyone knew how to treat gunshot wounds, prepared bandages and tourniquets like she was getting ready for a battle. You doing all right, Mama? Better than I have been. Turns out I just needed something to fight for that wasn't just memory. Sarah smiled. Your father would be proud of you, Elena, of what you've built here. On the morning of the 14th day, they woke to find Caleb's army on the horizon. It was bigger than expected. Elena counted at least 30 men, maybe more. They spread out in a line that seemed to stretch forever, just sitting there on their horses, waiting. Caleb rode forward alone, stopped at the property line. This is your last chance, Elena, he shouted across the distance. Walk away now and I'll let everyone live. Rowan stepped out onto the porch, rifle in his hands but not raised. The lady said, no, you want this land. You're going to have to take it. So be it, Caleb turned his horse. Everything that happens next is on you, Hale. Remember that when you're burying your wife? He rode back to his line. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then he raised his hand, dropped it in a signal. The army charged. The first volley of gunfire was deafening. Elena dropped behind the water trough Rowan had reinforced with iron plates, feeling bullets punch into wood and metal around her. The sound was worse than she'd imagined. Not the clean cracks from practice shooting, but a chaos of noise that made thinking impossible. Hold your fire, Rowan's voice cut through the chaos. Wait until they're in range. Caleb's men were charging hard, trying to close the distance before the defenders could organize. It was a smart tactic. Overwhelm them fast, don't give them time to aim properly. But Rowan had anticipated it. He'd marked distances with stakes in the ground, knew exactly when the riders would be close enough that every shot counted. Now! He fired first, and the rest followed. Halt! 3 riders went down immediately. Horses screamed and bolted. The charge faltered as men suddenly realized this wasn't going to be the easy victory Caleb had promised. They scattered, looking for cover, and the organized assault became a siege. Elena fired, reloaded, fired again. She wasn't aiming to kill, couldn't bring herself to deliberately end a life even now. But she aimed close enough to make men dive for cover, to keep them pinned down. Beside her, Daniel was methodical, choosing his shots with care. On the porch, Charlie Brennan and his nephew worked in tandem, covering each other's reloads. The Martinez brothers had taken position in the partially rebuilt barn, firing from the loft through gaps in the wood. Tom Hendricks and his son held the house's second floor, rifles poking out of windows. It was a good defensive position, but it wouldn't hold forever. Caleb had the numbers, and numbers always won eventually. The first hour was just noise and smoke and fear. Elena's ears rang, her shoulder ached from the rifle's kick, and her throat was raw from breathing gun smoke. But they held. Every time Caleb's men tried to advance, they drove them back with concentrated fire. Then the barn caught fire. Elena didn't see how it started, maybe a torch, maybe a lucky shot hitting a lantern, but suddenly the Martinez brothers were scrambling down from the loft, flames climbing behind them. The structure Rowan and the neighbors had worked so hard to rebuild was burning again, and this time there'd be nothing left. "Fall back to the house," Rowan ordered. "Everyone inside." They ran, covering each other as they moved. The Hendricks boy took a bullet in the leg and went down. His father grabbed him, started dragging him toward the house. Elena laid down cover fire, not thinking, just shooting anywhere she saw movement. They made it inside and barricaded the doors. 14 people crammed into a house built for a family of 3, all of them breathing hard, some bleeding. The Hendricks boy was crying, trying not to but unable to stop. Sarah Cross was already working on his leg, her hands steady despite the chaos outside. "It went through," she announced after a moment. "Clean wound. He'll be fine if we keep it from getting infected." Outside, the gunfire had stopped. Elena risked a look through the window and saw Caleb's men regrouping, staying out of rifle range. They'd learned their lesson about charging. Now they'd settle in and wait, maybe try to burn the house like they'd burned the barn. "We can't stay here," Tom Hendricks stated the obvious. "They'll just wait us out or smoke us out." "I know." Rowan was thinking, his eyes moving over the terrain visible from the window. "We need to break their siege, hit them hard enough that they back off, or at least thin their numbers." "How? We're outnumbered 2-1 and they've got us surrounded." "Not completely surrounded. They're thinnest on the south side near the creek. Probably figured we wouldn't run that way because it's rough country." Rowan turned to face everyone. "If we can break through there, scatter into the canyons, we can regroup later. They can't chase all of us at once." "That's running," Charlie Brennan said. "We came here to fight. And we fought. But there's no shame in living to fight another day." Rowan's voice was firm. "We stay here, we die here. All of us. Is that what you want?" Nobody answered. The truth was too heavy to speak aloud. They were losing, had been losing from the moment Caleb's army appeared on the horizon. The only question was whether they'd die pointlessly or survive to try again. Elena spoke up. "I'm not running." Everyone turned to look at her. Rowan's face went pale. "Elena, this is my land, my home. If we run now, Caleb wins. He gets everything, and we get nothing but the knowledge we survived." She met Rowan's eyes. "I can't live with that. I'd rather die here." "That's noble and stupid," Rowan grabbed her arm. "I'm not letting you die for a piece of land. It's not about the land anymore. It's about refusing to let men like Caleb take whatever they want just because they have more guns." Elena pulled free. "You said it yourself. Sometimes fighting when you know you'll lose is the point. Well, I'm making my point. By dying? By standing." She touched his face, gentle. "I'm not asking you to stay. Take everyone who wants to leave and go. I'll hold them here as long as I can." For a moment, she thought he might hit her. The fury in his eyes was that intense. Then it shifted to something else. Resignation, maybe, or understanding. "You're the most stubborn woman I've ever met." "I know. And I love you for it, even though it's going to get us both killed." "I know that too." He kissed her hard, desperate. When he pulled back, his expression had changed. "All right. We stay. But we do it smart, not stupid." He addressed the group. "Anyone who wants to run, now's your chance. No judgment." The Hendricks family looked at each other. Tom nodded slowly. "We stay. Boy's leg can't handle running anyway." Charlie Brennan checked his ammunition. "I'm too old to start over somewhere else. Might as well die doing something worthwhile." The Martinez brothers didn't even discuss it. "We stay." Daniel Price smiled. "Hell, I didn't ride all this way just to run at the first sign of trouble." Even Sarah Cross spoke up. "I already lost one person I loved to this land. I'm not running from the second." Rowan looked around at all of them. These people who'd chosen to stand when running was the sensible option. "Then we make them pay for every inch. We turn this house into a fortress they can't break." They spent the next hour preparing. Rowan had everyone move to interior rooms, away from windows that could shatter. They stacked furniture for barricades, positioned themselves where they could fire from cover. Sarah set up a makeshift hospital in the kitchen with what medical supplies they had. Outside, Caleb's men were getting restless. Elena could see them through gaps in the shutters, milling around, arguing. Some wanted to just burn the house and be done with it. Others thought there might be a way to force a surrender without more deaths. Then Caleb himself rode forward, flanked by Mason and Jeremiah. "Hale, I know you can hear me." He stopped just outside rifle range. This has gone on long enough. Send out Elena and the others can go free. Rowan appeared at the window. Go to hell, Caleb. I'm trying to end this without more bloodshed. All I want is the land. The people can leave. Funny way of showing it, burning Morrison's ranch to the ground. That was a message. Same as this is a message. Caleb's horse danced sideways, agitated by the tension. You can't win, Hale. You've got what, a dozen people in there? I've got 30. You're out of food, low on ammunition, and you're trapped. Be reasonable. Reasonable. Rowan's laugh was bitter. You want reasonable? Leave. Take your men and leave, and we'll call it even. You know I can't do that. Then we've got nothing to talk about. Rowan ducked back inside just as Caleb's men opened fire, shattering what was left of the windows. Glass exploded inward, wood splintered, and Elena pressed herself flat against the floor as bullets chewed through the walls. It went on for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. When it finally stopped, the house was a wreck. Holes in the walls big enough to stick your hand through, furniture shredded, the smell of gunpowder so thick it made breathing hard. Everyone all right? Rowan called out. Various voices confirmed they were alive, if not exactly all right. Elena checked herself. A few cuts from flying glass. Nothing serious. Across the room, Daniel was bleeding from his arm, where a splinter had gouged him, but he waved off concern. That was a warning shot, Tom Hendricks said grimly. Next one, they'll aim to kill. He was right. Caleb had shown them what his men could do. The next assault would be for real, meant to end this fight permanently. But before it could come, the sound of horses echoed from the south. Many horses, moving fast. Elena risked a look through a gap in the wall. What she saw made her heart stop. Riders were coming across the creek, at least 20 of them. For a second, she thought it was reinforcements for Caleb, that somehow he'd gotten even more men. Then she recognized the lead rider, Jack Morrison, his face set hard, carrying a rifle across his saddle. Behind him came families Elena thought had pulled out of the fight. The Walshes, who'd quit after the first threats. The Brennan cousins from up north, the Chen family from town. Even some townspeople who'd never taken a side before. The blacksmith, the general store owner, Margaret from the boarding house. They charged into Caleb's line from behind, not shooting but making enough noise and chaos that his men scattered in confusion. It wasn't an army, but it was enough to break the siege. Rowan saw the opening. Now, everyone out! Head for the creek! They burst from the house like water from a broken dam. Elena ran, her lungs burning, expecting to feel a bullet punch into her back any second. Around her, the others ran too, Daniel supporting the Hendricks boy, Sarah running despite her age, the Martinez brothers providing cover fire. They reached the creek where Morrison's group was holding position. Jack pulled Elena up behind him on his horse without slowing. "Thought you were done fighting," she shouted over the chaos. "I was. Then I heard what you were doing, standing against all of them." He spurred his horse. "Couldn't let you die alone." Caleb's men were trying to regroup, but between the defenders from the house and Morrison's unexpected reinforcements, they were caught in crossfire. Some went down, others threw down their weapons and surrendered. A few, including Jeremiah Rourke, just ran. Caleb himself sat on his horse in the middle of it all, watching his carefully planned assault fall apart. When his eyes found Elena, the rage in them was bright enough to burn. He raised his rifle, aimed straight at her. Morrison saw it the same moment Elena did. He tried to swerve his horse, tried to get her out of the line of fire, but there wasn't time. The shot rang out. Elena felt the impact, but it wasn't her. Morrison grunted, grabbed his side, started to slide from the saddle. She caught him, tried to hold him up, but his weight pulled them both down. They hit the ground hard. Elena scrambled to Morrison's side, saw blood spreading across his shirt. Too much blood. "Jack!" She pressed her hands against the wound, trying to stop the bleeding. "Jack, hold on!" He grabbed her wrist with surprising strength. Caleb, don't let him win." Then Rowan was there, rifle up, firing at where Caleb had been. But Caleb was already gone, retreating with what was left of his men. The battle was over. They'd won. But the cost was written in Morrison's blood. Sarah Cross worked on him in the creek bed while the shooting died down around them. Her face was grim, her hands moving with practiced efficiency, but Elena could see the truth in her eyes. The wound was bad. Maybe too bad. We need to get him to a real doctor, Sarah said finally. I've stopped the bleeding, but if that bullet's still in there, he'll die from infection even if he doesn't bleed out. Town's 3 hours away, Daniel observed. He won't make it. Then we ride fast and pray he does. Rowan was already commandeering the fastest horse. I'll take him. Elena, you stay here. Make sure Caleb doesn't come back. I'm coming with you. Elena, he took that bullet for me. I'm coming. She climbed up behind Morrison on the horse. Besides, you'll need help keeping him steady. They rode like demons were chasing them. Morrison slumped between them, fading in and out of consciousness. Every time his breathing got shallower, Elena would talk to him, keep him focused, remind him of his boys who needed him home. You don't have to lie, Morrison mumbled at one point. I know how bad it is. Then you know you're too stubborn to die. Elena squeezed his hand, just like the rest of us. They made it to town in 2.5 hours. The doctor took one look at Morrison and got to work, chasing Elena and Rowan out of the room while he operated. They waited in the hall, covered in blood and dirt, neither of them speaking. Finally, Elena broke the silence. Is it over? I don't know. Caleb ran, but running doesn't mean quitting. Rowan slumped against the wall. We hurt him today. Hurt him bad. But men like him, they don't give up easy. So what do? We wait. See if Morrison lives. See if Caleb comes back. See if any of this was worth it. He looked at her and his eyes were haunted. Elena, we almost died today. All of us. I know. And you'd do it again. Yes. She took his hand. Because some things are worth dying for. This land, our people, the right to stand up to bullies and say no. That's worth dying for. I disagree. She looked at him, surprised. You're worth dying for. Rowan pulled her close. The land, the principle, all of it, that's just dirt and ideas. But you? You're real. You're worth every risk I took today. Elena pressed her face against his chest, let herself cry for the first time since the shooting started. She cried for Morrison bleeding in the next room, for the barn burning, for her father who'd started this whole mess with his desperate arrangement. She cried for the girl she'd been 6 months ago who'd expected an old man and gotten Rowan instead. She cried for everything they'd lost and everything they'd found in the losing. When she was done, wrung out and empty, Rowan was still there. Solid. Real. Hers. The doctor emerged 3 hours later, wiping his hands on a bloody towel. He'll live. Lost a lot of blood and he'll be laid up for months, but he'll live. The relief was so intense Elena had to sit down. Morrison would live. They'd won. It was over. Except it wasn't. Word came the next day that Caleb had fled to Santa Fe, was calling in favors, preparing to come back with legal documents and federal marshals. He might have lost the shooting war, but he was preparing to win the legal one. Let him try, Elena said when she heard. We've got documentation now. Witnesses who'll testify to what he did. The burned ranches, the poisoned wells, the attempted murder. His friends in Santa Fe won't be able to ignore that. Daniel, who'd ridden into town with them, nodded. I've already started filing complaints with the territorial governor. Between the witnesses and the physical evidence, we've got a case. How long? Rowan asked. Months, probably. These things move slow, but eventually Caleb will have to answer for what he's done. Daniel's smile was grim. And when he does, I'll make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of man he is. They stayed in town for a week while Morrison recovered enough to be moved. During that time, other survivors straggled in with their own stories of the battle. 2 of Caleb's men had died in the fighting. 4 more were so badly wounded they'd never work again. The rest had scattered, some joining up with other outfits, some just disappearing into the territory's vastness. Caleb's empire, built on fear and violence, was crumbling. Without his men to enforce his will, the smaller ranchers started taking back what was theirs. Water rights were renegotiated, property lines redrawn. The territory began to reshape itself into something closer to fair. When they finally returned to the ranch, Elena barely recognized it. The barn was gone, just a blackened skeleton. The house was shot full of holes, windows missing, doors hanging crooked. The fences were trampled, the corrals broken. It looked like a war zone because that's exactly what it had been, but it was still theirs. We can rebuild, Rowan said, surveying the damage. It'll take time and money we don't have, but we can rebuild. Actually, Daniel cleared his throat. About the money. I've been authorized by the territorial government to offer compensation to victims of Caleb Rourke's campaign. It's not much, maybe a few $100s per family, but it's something. Compensation? Elena couldn't believe it. From where? Caleb's assets are being seized as part of the criminal investigation. His ranch, his cattle, everything. It'll be liquidated and distributed to the people he hurt. Daniel smiled. You won't get rich, but you'll get enough to rebuild. Maybe even improve on what you had before. It took 6 months, but eventually the money came through. Not just for Elena and Rowan, but for Morrison, the Martinez family, everyone who'd stood against Caleb. It wasn't justice exactly. No amount of money could restore what had been lost. But it was acknowledgement. It was the territory saying that what Caleb had done was wrong, and the people he'd hurt mattered. They rebuilt the barn first, bigger and better than before. Then they fixed the house, replacing the shot-out windows with glass that actually fit, patching the holes, making it into something that felt like home instead of just shelter. The ranch itself began to thrive. With Caleb gone, the water rights disputes ended. Elena and Rowan had enough water for their cattle and enough to share with neighbors who needed it. The drought finally broke that spring, bringing rain that turned the brown grass green and filled the creek to overflowing. Sarah Cross stayed lucid more often than not, helping Elena run the household and occasionally offering wisdom earned through hard years. She never fully recovered from Thomas's death. That wound went too deep. But she found a way to live alongside the grief instead of being consumed by it. Jack Morrison healed slowly, left with a limp and a scar, but otherwise intact. He rebuilt his ranch with help from the same neighbors who'd stood with him during the fight. His sons grew into men who understood that standing up for what's right sometimes means risking everything. Caleb Rourke never came back. The last anyone heard, he'd fled to California, his reputation destroyed, his fortune seized. Some said he'd died bitter and alone. Others claimed he'd started over under a new name. Elena didn't care either way. He was gone, and that was enough. The alliance of small ranchers that had formed to fight Caleb became something more permanent. They formalized it, created bylaws and elected leaders, turned a desperate wartime coalition into a mutual aid society that would last. When one ranch faced trouble, the others rallied. When someone needed help with harvest or branding or barn raising, the community showed up. It wasn't perfect. Arguments still happened, people still disagreed, individual grudges and personalities still caused friction. But there was a foundation now, a shared understanding that they were stronger together than apart. A year after the battle, Elena discovered she was pregnant. She told Rowan at sunset, standing in front of the rebuilt barn, while the sky turned colors that still took her breath away. His reaction was everything she'd hoped for: shock, joy, fear, wonder, all of it tangled together in an expression that made her laugh. "Are you sure?" The doctor in town confirmed it yesterday. She took his hand, placed it on her stomach. "We're having a baby. We're having a baby." He repeated it like he was trying to convince himself it was real. Then he picked her up and spun her around, both of them laughing like children. That night, lying in bed with his hand still resting on her stomach, Rowan asked the question she'd been expecting. "Are you happy with all of this? The ranch? The baby? Me?" Elena thought about how to answer. A year ago, she'd been alone and desperate, watching her mother fade and her father's dream die. She'd been bitter about the arranged marriage, angry at being treated like property to be bartered. Now she was lying next to a man she loved, carrying his child, on land she'd fought for and won. It wasn't the life she'd imagined for herself. It was harder, more violent, more uncertain. But it was hers in a way nothing else had ever been. "Yes," she said simply. "I'm happy. Even though it's not what you wanted. When this started, I mean. What I wanted was a life that meant something, a partner who saw me as an equal, a chance to build something that would last." She rolled over to face him. "Turns out I got all of that, just not the way I expected." Life rarely goes the way we expect. "No, but sometimes it goes better." She kissed him. This went better. The baby, a girl they named Grace after Rowan's grandmother, was born in the spring during a rainstorm that reminded Elena of the night the barn burned. Sarah Cross attended the birth, her hands steady and sure, talking Elena through the pain with the authority of someone who'd done this before. Rowan paced outside, occasionally bursting in to ask if everything was all right, getting shooed out by Sarah each time. When Grace finally arrived, squalling and red-faced and perfect, he stood in the doorway and cried without shame. "She's beautiful," he whispered, touching his daughter's tiny hand with a gentleness Elena had never seen in him. "She's perfect." "She's ours," Elena corrected, exhausted but happy. "And she's going to grow up on land we fought for, in a territory where people stand together instead of tearing each other apart. That's our gift to her." Over the years, the story of the Range War became the kind of legend people told in saloons and around campfires. Details got exaggerated, events rearranged, heroes made larger than life. Some versions had Rowan single-handedly fighting off 50 men. Others had Elena as a sharpshooter who never missed. A few claimed Caleb had been killed in the fighting, though anyone who'd actually been there knew better. The truth was simpler and more complicated than any legend could capture. It was the story of ordinary people pushed past their breaking point who chose to fight instead of fold. It was about refusing to accept that might made right, that money could buy justice, that powerful men could do whatever they wanted without consequences. It was also about the cost of that refusal. Morrison's limp, the scars everyone carried, physical and otherwise, the families who'd lost everything and never fully recovered, the dead, Caleb's men mostly, but dead nonetheless, whose names nobody remembered. War had consequences, even when you won. Elena made sure Grace understood that as she grew, made sure she knew that violence was sometimes necessary but never glorious, that standing up to bullies was important but painful, that fighting for what's right didn't make the fighting hurt any less. "Your grandfather died on this land," Elena told Grace when she was old enough to understand. "Your father and I almost died here too. A lot of people bled to make it possible for you to grow up safe. Don't ever forget that." "I won't, Mama." Grace, at 8 years old, was already showing signs of being as stubborn as both her parents. "When I grow up, I'm going to make sure nobody ever tries to take our land again." "I hope you never have to." Elena touched her daughter's hair, soft as silk. "I hope you grow up in a world where people settle their differences with words instead of guns, but if you don't—" She met Grace's eyes, so like Rowan's, it hurt sometimes. "You stand your ground. You remember what this land cost, and you protect it." "I will." Elena believed her. On their 10th anniversary, Rowan surprised her with something he'd been working on in secret. He led her to the hill where her father was buried, where the cottonwood tree somehow still clung to life against all odds. There was a new gravestone, not just for Thomas Cross, but for everyone who'd died in the fight. The men from both sides, because even enemies deserved to be remembered. It was simple granite carved with names in a single line. They stood when standing was hard. "It's not much," Rowan said, watching her face, "but I wanted there to be something, some record that this happened, that it mattered." Elena read the names, some familiar, some not. Young men mostly, who'd died for other men's greed or pride or fear. She thought about how different things might have been if Caleb had just been reasonable, if her father had made different choices, if she'd run instead of staying to fight. But then Grace came running up the hill, laughing, chasing a butterfly through the grass that grew thick and green now that the drought was finally, truly over. And Elena couldn't bring herself to wish any of it different, because wishing that meant wishing Grace away, and that was impossible. "It matters." She took Rowan's hand. It all mattered. They stood together on the hill, watching their daughter play in grass that grew on land they'd bought with blood and stubbornness and love. The wind came across the mesa, but it didn't have teeth anymore. It was just wind, carrying the smell of rain and growing things, promising a future that might actually be better than the past. That night, as they did every night, Elena and Rowan sat on their porch and watched the sunset turn the sky impossible colors. Grace was inside with Sarah, both of them laughing about something Elena couldn't quite hear. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if you'd said no?" Elena asked. "If you'd refused your father's arrangement and never came here?" "Sometimes. Usually when my back hurts from fence work," Rowan smiled. "But then I look at what we built, and I know I'd make the same choice every time. Even knowing how hard it would be? Especially knowing how hard it would be." He pulled her close. "The easy things don't change you. They don't make you stronger or braver or more than you were. It's the hard things that do that. And I like who I became by standing with you. Elena thought about the girl she'd been, scared, desperate, resigned to a life of sacrifice and loss. That girl was gone, burned away in barn fires and battles, replaced by someone harder, but also somehow softer. Someone who knew what she was capable of when pushed, but also what she was capable of when loved. I like who I became too, she admitted, even though some days I miss being simple. You were never simple. No, but I was smaller, less complicated. Now I'm all sharp edges and strong opinions and stubbornness. I married you for the stubbornness. Rowan kissed her temple. The sharp edges and strong opinions are just bonuses. They sat in comfortable silence as the sun finished setting and the stars came out one by one. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called and another answered. The land stretched out around them, dark and vast and theirs. Not because they'd inherited it or bought it cheap, because they'd fought for it, bled for it, refused to let it go even when letting go would have been easier, because they'd stood with neighbors who became family, because they'd faced down bullies and won, because they'd chosen each other over and over again when choosing would have been so much simpler. That was the real story, Elena realized. Not the guns or the fire or the dramatic showdown, just two people who decided they'd rather build something together than lose everything alone. Just ordinary stubbornness elevated to something like heroism by the simple act of not giving up. Grace came out onto the porch, climbed into her mother's lap even though she was getting too big for it. Grandma says it's time for bed. Grandma's probably right. Elena kissed her daughter's head. Go on. We'll be in soon. Grace ran inside and they could hear Sarah's voice reading a story. The same stories Sarah had read to Elena a lifetime ago, when the world was smaller and the future seemed certain. We did good, Rowan said quietly. Didn't we? Elena looked at the land, the house, the barn rising solid against the stars. Looked at the window where her daughter's shadow moved against lamplight. Looked at the man beside her who'd started as a stranger and become everything. Yeah. She leaned her head on his shoulder. We did good. And in the vast, indifferent wilderness of New Mexico territory, on a ranch bought with blood and rebuilt with hope, that was enough. That was more than enough. That was everything.